OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. It's Jerry Gilroy and Adrian Barry with you this morning all the way through until 10 o'clock. We have Keith Wood's State of the Union coming a little bit later on. Éanna Falvey is going to join us to talk to us about what World Rugby are doing in terms of the protocols to try and get players back on the field of play with respect to COVID, and also the general health of the game and how the science and medical staffs around the world have begun to influence exactly how the game evolves and develops. If you want to get involved in any of the conversations that we're having this morning, you should drop us a WhatsApp. 0879 180 180 is the number, or you can also, of course, just leave a comment on whatever stream you're watching this on. And the best place these days to listen or to watch us is on the OTB Sports app. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store. Ordinarily, on a day like today, Adrian, we'll be talking non-stop about Liverpool against Manchester City. But because the league is done, it almost feels like it's not quite an irrelevance, but nearly.
Yeah, pretty much. Is there a more convoluted construct than the Guard of Honour? Like the amount of conversation about it that I think that most people outside of the 22 players that are going to be involved in the thing really don't give a toss about. Like, who cares? Give a Guard of Honour, don't give a Guard of Honour. Pep Guardiola has handled it perfectly, obviously, by saying Liverpool have been amazing. They deserve this title. They deserve that Guard of Honour. Like, give them absolutely no ammunition for next season. But I think that most people couldn't give a toss about it.
Well, I mean, it's really? Do you not remember those times that the English rugby team would clap the Irish team off because we'd won? Like, it's good sportsmanship. So I don't think it's that convoluted. It's like paying deference to the game. It's a good thing to do. Are you saying you don't think it's a good thing to do? You hate this nice aspect. You hate handshakes, I suppose. We're all supposed to hate handshakes now.
Well, we do. We all do, yeah. I think it's a lovely, quaint idea that it's not quite the equivalent of all teams get clapped off at the end of a rugby game, regardless of what happens. It's the handshake in the beer jar, in the sheds afterwards. It's not quite that. It is a quaint idea that, once you get crowned champions within the season, does it carry over if it was won on the last day of the season? Does it carry over to the first day of the new season?
Good question. I'm not sure. Do Guards of Honour carry over, or is there a statute of limitations on them?
Anyway,
I think it's like, is it because, I don't know.
I did start out this by saying that nobody gives a toss about it, and here we are, knee deep into a conversation about it. But I really don't believe that there are very many genuine fans at Liverpool or City who give a toss whether there's a Guard of Honour or not. It's not about that.
So you watched the whole Jordan documentary series, right?
Oh, listen.
And the players walking off, the Pistons walking off. Like, how annoying it is when you aren't given sportsmanship. So everybody,
that
cares about it.
That was a post-match handshake, right? Like that is sportsmanship. I 100% am with you. Like, you've got to.
The game was still on. That's why it was so dramatic. But
and those lads were saying, the guy was like, no, I mean, it was a handshake. Was it really a thing? Who was it? Which player was it? I can't remember. He was like, and also it was just the latest chapter in the Jordan, I really hate this guy and I'm gonna make him pay.
I can see how if Man City didn't do this, that Liverpool would use it. And I think the Liverpool fans want to see the Man City players humbled before them. Kneel before our greatness. We are the greatness. Of course they do.
They would use it.
The notion that nobody cares about it, I think, is erroneous. I would say that the Liverpool fans are absolutely tuning in early to watch this tonight to make sure. Yeah, Emma is my witness here. She's a Liverpool fan. She's like, yes, of course.
Well,
this is the team that beat them when they had a record number of wins and points last year. Like, this is a team who has been a torment to them over the last number of years, who they thought they were never going to beat, and tonight they get to rub their noses in it. Of course, they want to take in every second of it.
I'm glad a Liverpool supporter has spoken, because it was literally on the tip of my tongue to ask you, Ger, if Villa were to win the league, and then I thought actually the ridiculousness of the question doesn't deserve to be asked.
So yeah, I think Guards of Honour are something that everyone's going to be watching about. Sorry, but the game itself, I don't know what's going to happen in the game itself. Maybe we'll come back to this a little bit. We took up all our time there talking about Guards of Honour, but I'm interested in the psychology of Liverpool tonight. If they are on the beach and they don't really care about what actually happens in the match, and they just let City kind of go, you can win this game 6-7-0, you can win this 22-0, because that's the number of points that we are ahead of you, 23-0. I don't know. I'm wondering if they're going to be able to put in the level of intensity of performance that we've seen from them all season. And if they are, then that's pretty special.
Yeah, I think they will, by the way. I think there's some stuff in the papers this morning about Jurgen Klopp talking about the spirit of the All Blacks, which probably gives you an indication straight away. But I don't think they can, like, it's difficult to turn it on and off like that. And also the new season is going to be upon them, like, fairly quickly, that if they decide they're flicking the switch now, like, how difficult it might be. It's not a great attitude, right? Like, if Klopp is... I don't know, it's probably never going to be an outright spoken thing anyway. It's just something that sort of seeps into the squad that you have to maybe try and root out then over the coming weeks. But I just doubt, given everything they've done over the previous few months, that now they decide, particularly against City, like maybe after that, but particularly against City, like you said, I think they do want to rub their nose in it, and by beating them 22-0.
Oh, we'll see. When we talk about this a little bit later on as well, if you've got a view on that, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number that you can send us a message on, or of course you can always just leave a comment on Twitter using the hashtag OTBAM. Here's what's coming up for you on the show this morning. Shane Hannon is going to bring us the latest sports news at around about 8:10. We've got the sports pages from 8:15. Para-cyclist Richael Timothy is going to talk to us about her plans for the Olympic Games, and also about the fact that they're currently recruiting for para-athletes in a range of different sports, and her own story is remarkable, so that'll give you an indication of who might be eligible to partake in parasports. And State of the Union today is Dr. Éanna Falvey, who is the Chief Medical Officer of World Rugby, himself a former international boxer, and of course the team doctor with the Irish rugby team, with Munster and ultimately the Lions for a long period of time, a Cloyne man, so from the hometown of Christy Ring, The Rock and Donal Óg, a fairly important sporting seam running through Irish, and now it turns out world sport, because he's in charge of the medical side of World Rugby. We'll talk to him just after 9 o'clock this morning. Really interesting conversation. That one's already in the can. So before all that, though, at 7:37 this morning here on OTBM, let's bring you the best from last night's Off the Ball. We're going to hear from Andy Minton in a few minutes on the very latest situation at Manchester United. But first, Shamrock Rovers chairman Jonathan Roach here, following on from Sligo Rovers treasurer the night before. Here is Jonathan Roach speaking with Joe Malloy last night. Have a look.
Can you first explain to me, and I hasten to add, Shamrock Rovers are perfectly entitled to vote whatever way they want in the initial stage of this thing, but certainly it was very apparent 9 of the Premier Division clubs didn't want to proceed with the resumption as planned. Shamrock Rovers was the only Premier Division club that voted to proceed. What was the reasoning, Jonathan? Why did you think this was the best deal, or the best deal to go with?
Well, kind of first of all, we would have, and I believe we're correct, a completely different take on what I've just heard there from David Rowe from Sligo there. It wasn't a vote. It was 9 Premier Division clubs expressed an opinion, and were agreed on that opinion that they wanted to send to the NLEC. The 9 First Division clubs wanted, which is different than agreed, wanted to remain, or the status quo to remain as is. Then it went forward to the NLEC. Those 9 clubs, actually a third of them didn't agree initially with option 3, which Sligo and David Rowe expressed was what they wanted. They changed.
Sorry, you've just lost me. Option 3. We need probably need to keep this a bit more. You know, I'm just conscious. Not everyone I don't know what option 1, 2, 3, and 4 are. So maybe just
Well, three clubs out of the 9 that expressed an opinion only changed at the last minute.
Okay.
So they had a different opinion, and it wasn't a vote among clubs that was to be carried over. It was an opinion expressed by 9 clubs that were agreed on that opinion, and the first division wanted the status quo to remain, and that was our position. Never changed from day one, from this 8 weeks ago. We wanted football to come back as quickly as possible. We actually wanted all the games to be played, 27 at a minimum, but understood that not all clubs who expressed an opinion financially couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously it went forward to the NLEC again to correct people. The remit of the NLEC, which the clubs were for 13 years excluded from until last year, and who now are in the majority. The remit in the terms of reference is to do what's best for the League of Ireland. It's not to represent Shamrock Rovers or any other club on it. It's not to represent the division. It's not to represent PCA or FDA. It's to do what's best for the League of Ireland. That's what every single person on that NLEC was to do. And the vote was 5-2. It wasn't 5-4 or anything else like that. And every person which the clubs control, the NLEC, had the vote, and they voted to go with remain with the status quo and to get back to football as soon as possible, which everybody wants.
Okay, so can you though explain to me the difference? So you're saying it wasn't an initial vote, the 9-1 Premier Division clubs not wanting to proceed and Shamrock Rovers thinking it was best to proceed. I presume everyone's sitting around having a talk about this, or there's some lines of communication and you're exchanging ideas. Could you, in so much as you can, Jonathan, explain why or what the difference was between how Shamrock Rovers saw the situation and the other 9 Premier Division clubs saw the situation? Like, why did you think this is the idea, this is the best route forward, and why didn't the other 9?
Well, again, as I said, it was 6, and then the other 3 clubs joined them at the end. But what we've seen in any change to the relegation and promotion issues would dramatically affect the competitive nature of both divisions, not just our division, of both divisions. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want that to happen as a club. And we were upfront and we expressed that opinion from the start. And when the issue with COVID was the financial package, which we're all suffering from, etc., it was all financial. Relegation and promotion has only come into the last week or so. We all signed off on a financial package that was improved over the time. Everyone's going to lose money. Every football club we see in the UK, Wigan going into administration today in this COVID, and the financial package was to try to protect the clubs and to get back playing football as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. So this relegation thing has only come up in the last week or so once the financial package is signed off, and we believe that the competitive nature of both divisions would be affected by any change in the relegation and promotion playoff. And we're steadfast in that opinion, and we stand over that opinion, and we express that opinion to all clubs in various meetings. And obviously then the opinions were fed into the NLEC, who, as I said, their remit, in terms of reference, to do what's best for the League of Ireland, not for Shamrock Rovers, not for Longford Town, not for anyone else, do what's best for the League of Ireland. And they made that decision, and the vote was 5.
Yeah. And why don't the other 9 think that 1 down instead of 2 down doesn't affect the competitiveness of the league? Like David Rowe's point last night was, we're now proposing to play half the number of games, therefore there shouldn't be the same number of teams relegated. I mean, I would have thought with just 13, 14 games remaining, for instance, the race or the relegation battle is still going to be very, very competitive. Like this is now become a sprint as opposed to a marathon. And I'm just wondering, if you're sitting around and 9 other teams are saying, well, we think this is the best way to go, would that not be a convincing argument? Like, would you feel, well, maybe we need to rethink our position here if everybody else seems to think the other way is best?
Well, as I said, it wasn't always the 9 clubs, it was 6, and it turned into a kind of, in my opinion, I think unity is good.
Yeah.
Shamrock Rovers started the PCA, set up the first meeting 5 years ago. But we feel as a club that unity is kind of only deserved when it's properly constructed, and it's not constructed that's aimed at screwing other people in it.
Who's trying to screw who? Sorry.
Well, we think if the relegation and promotion places are changed, I think it has a dramatic effect on the First Division as well as the Premier Division matches. And we as a club expressed this opinion that we think it would drastically affect competitive nature if only one was relegated automatically and only 1 club was promoted from the First Division, of both divisions. And that, and we think the sporting integrity of it, etc. And we have a different opinion from 6 clubs up until the other day, when, as I said, they all agreed and expressed an opinion, agreed an opinion. And that's where we are.
Yeah, sure. I mean, ultimately the other 3 did side with the other 6, and that became a 9, and so they all ultimately agreed. So, I mean, look, I mean, the club's entitled to its own opinion. I mean, I'm an honest broker here. I'm trying to figure out what everyone thinks. On the second point, because Shamrock Rovers are entitled to vote for it whatever way they see it, but on the second point, David Rowe has a very different opinion on your remit on the National League Executive Committee. There are 7 members. It's to give clubs a voice. As you rightly say, before the reforms came in, clubs didn't get a voice on that National League Executive Committee. So he would put the argument forward, and I can see where he's coming from, that Shamrock Rovers are on it, Dundalk are on it, St. Pat's are on it, that actually when the league has voted 9-1, that should be taken into account when Shamrock Rovers are voting on the National League Executive Committee. Yes, you have your own opinion and you've said it's, our remit to do what's best for the league, but you are also there in part to represent the Premier Division, and he felt that you've misused your position on that committee.
I think he's wholly incorrect. I said, I'm not on the NLEC.
Sure.
As you know. So the terms of reference of the, and again, I'm not going to get into a flag match with Dave or anybody else.
Sure.
But all the clubs should check what the terms of reference are for the NLEC. And it's to do what's best for the League of Ireland. Independently, each individual member. It's not to do what's right for the Premier Division or for the First Division. It's to do what's best for the League of Ireland. That's what their remit is. They listened to the arguments or the options of both, I understand, and they made their decision. Just because I don't tell our representatives to vote one way or another, other clubs shouldn't do the same just because they work for them, etc. People who are on the NLEC, which is an effective and will be even more important in the coming weeks with the ongoing issues ongoing, that be various things that may happen in the league, are there to control the 2 leagues and to do what's best and fair and use sport and integrity, be independent in their decisions, not what's best for one club or one division. And that's what the decision was made. Clubs are entitled to express their opinion, which they have and we have, but it's not an ultimatum to someone sitting on the NLEC to go one way or the other.
Okay. So, look, Sligo are going to stick to their version of what your role is in the NLEC, and I hear what you're saying about how you see your role. But either way,
but they have to stick to the terms of reference.
Yeah.
People who are on.
No, I hear you. They different interpretations of it, but regardless, so we are where we are now. The FAI, I think, are going to look at the situation, review the decision-making process, try and sort that out by the end of this week. They have asked clubs not to get legal in any way because that would just create a mess that nobody wants. Jonathan, how quickly are we to resolving this in a way that Sligo are happy, Shamrock Rovers are happy, the First Division are happy, and we can just, get things moving again? Because there's a lot of players and a lot of clubs very anxious, I'm sure, to do that. Like, if the FAI came back and said, listen, Shamrock Rovers, we sort of think the way things are looking, maybe we should go with just 1 down instead of 2 down. Is that like is that a line in the sand that you will not cross, or are you open to negotiation here and a bit of flexibility?
We'll work with, as I said again, it goes back to the NLEC. We won't jump up and down and stamp our feet when we don't get what we want. We wanted to play all our games left in the league. We wanted at least to play 3 tiers of games. But all the clubs listened to financial issues around it and understood that some clubs said they could only play a certain amount of games. And so the league has been reduced to 18 games. But we want to play all the games. But we're not going to. Everyone is suffering in that, and the speed of it has been very frustrating for all clubs, and it needs to be agreed on. The board, in my opinion, needs to ratify the decision as soon as possible. I think there's a press release there that there's a board meeting tomorrow, so some decision has to be ratified tomorrow because we all want to get back to playing football on the 31st of July. I think all clubs are agreed with that. And we've 13 league games left. We've an FAI Cup, thank God.
Yeah.
Because 2 weeks ago, some clubs didn't want to play in the FAI Cup, but now it's happening. And we're lucky enough that we have Europe to look forward to at the end of August.
Yeah.
So this needs to be acted on quickly. The decision by the NLEC needs to be go to the FAI board, and they need to be ratified. Or if it's not ratified, I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, that was my final question. So say the FAI look at this and they take the temperature from the Premier Division in particular, and they decide we can't proceed, too many clubs are unhappy with this. What's the Shamrock Rovers' response to that?
You'll never, like all clubs, as I kind of said earlier, all clubs will never agree on anything. That's why the NLEC is there. like, that's why it's there to make the best decision for the League of Ireland in the whole going forward.
Yeah.
It's not going to please We're not pleased with
if the FAI, for instance, think, well, look, it's not tenable to have 9 Premier Division clubs voting against it and 1 in favour. I appreciate the importance of the First Division as well, but if they are of the opinion we can't have 9 Premier Division clubs against the plan out of 10, what's the Shamrock Rovers' response?
Well, I said the 9 clubs expressed an opinion, and the clubs changed their opinion over time. Like, we want to get back playing football. As in, we're not the ones here stopping anything, or, as I said, going, we're not going to play. There's some clubs has said they're not going to play. I think from the start, players have been let go, etc. From early on in it. We've got to a situation now where there's a financial package, and now we need to get back to playing football, and it needs to be, we believe, the status quo needs to remain in regards to promotion and relegation for both divisions to be effective.
Yes.
If the FAI board can come up with something else,
yeah.
Like, we want to just get back playing football as soon as possible.
No, I get that. Everyone presumably wants that in the main. And if the FAI board say, we've thought about it, we've talked to the 10 clubs, including Shamrock Rovers, we've decided, given that it's half the normal season of 36 games, it's down to 18, we're going to go with 1 up, 1 down and leave it at that as a compromise. Is that something you can get on board with?
No, because it won't be the FAI board. It's the NLEC that, again, who the clubs control. They control. If we have 5 representatives from the clubs, there's 2 independents who are mandated to run the league. The NLEC will decide on what, and they have decided. Mm-hmm. They've made the vote. The vote was 5-2. 5-2. Unanimous. To go with getting back and to keep the status quo. It would have to, if I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know what will happen if the FAI board don't ratify that decision. And if it was another decision, the other way, if the NLEC had gone with the other way, or another option, it would, like, we'd still be playing, we'd still want to play football. We might be happy with it.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, we might think it affects it, but we'd be still willing to play football.
Okay. And just the last one, Jonathan, financially, how are Rovers set up at the moment? I know it's devastating for all the clubs in broad terms.
Yeah, it's devastating for everyone. It's devastating for us. And I've heard David actually on a few weeks ago saying it's all right for clubs with 2 million. We worked very, very hard for our investment from Dermot Desmond and IIU. We built the club over the last 4 or 5 years. We've invested in infrastructure, roadstone, etc. And no one just came along and threw Shamrock Rovers and our members 2 million invested in the football club. And it's very, very hard going forward without crowds, etc. We know the League of Ireland is reliant on revenue from crowds, etc. But with the package, the financial package that was put on the table, it helped. Obviously, the government subsidies has helped everybody in regards players' wages. We're still playing a considerable amount every week because we have high wages like Dundalk. We're fully professional. We have 52-week contracts. Our fans have, including their membership subscriptions, have given nearly €80,000 in the last 3 or 4 months. Sligo fans I've seen yesterday have a GoFundMe page of €20,000. So everybody across all the clubs are working and fighting their lives to make sure that football comes back, because it's so important to the whole league across the Premier Division and the First Division. But it is going to be tough, and I think there is going to be tough days and tough weeks ahead for all clubs.
Yeah.
And players and players just want to get back playing now. They're back training, most of them. So we just want to get back playing.
Before someone texts in to say it, I'm just going to say it. Norwich, Sheffield United, Brighton is not exactly the scariest of trios. At the same time, I think on United's last 3 visits to the Amex, they have not come away with 3 points. They have been vulnerable to a team like Brighton or any other Premier League team. And they're, Sheffield United and Brighton in particular, it was the second string against Norwich, but Sheffield United and Brighton in particular, Andy, they are starting to make these games look a bit easy and over after an hour. And that's not something United have been in the habit of doing for a long time.
No, but there's been a significant improvement, and nobody's getting carried away. Manchester United are still fifth in the table. Liverpool won the league at a canter. United have not put a proper title challenge up since Sir Alex Ferguson left the club in 2013. But when you consider how low the team have been at various stages this season, as low as 14th before the game against Liverpool in October, there's been a big improvement since January, a month when United lost 4 matches. The last time they lost was the game against Burnley at Old Trafford, and the vultures were circling them, and there's been a bad move pretty much from the end of last season, which finished terribly, partly because of the club's inability to do what you say and break down some of the teams who are lower down in the league table, but they seem to have cracked that. And it's not just going away to Brighton, where they'd lost every previous visit to the Amex Stadium, and winning convincingly and playing well and counter-attacking and seeing incredible performances. They've beaten Manchester City, they've beaten Chelsea 3 times, twice this season, beaten Manchester City 3 times this season. So Solskjaer is getting results against the best teams, but now he's starting to get results against the teams who are lower down. And there are several reasons for this. One, and I spoke to him at length during the lockdown, I feel that he's getting on top of the job rather than the job getting on top of him. Bruno Fernandes is a significant factor. Everybody knew he was a good player. He's turning out to be a fantastic player. He's lifting the performances of those around him. And then maybe the situation has led to Paul Pogba thinking, I'm not going to move on, I'm going to stay. He's a great player, and he's had a bad season because he's been injured, but he's playing better. He looks happier now. The team's winning. So you've got this virtuous circle where the confidence is improving, the enthusiasm levels are high, the vast majority of the players back the manager. Solskjaer gave me a very good quote, which was taken up by virtually everyone, which was, I'd rather have a hole in the team than an asshole. And he's got a point there, and you can see what he's trying to do. And he feels, and he told me after the Manchester City game in March, 2 or 3 new players. And then Manchester United would look like they'd have a serious side. But it's not just the headline stars, it's not just Bruno and Pogba. Rashford had a decent season, maybe not post-lockdown. Mason Greenwood, 18 years old, fantastic opening season. Nemanja Matic, I interviewed him pre-season in Singapore, and I went on Twitter and said, I've just interviewed Nemanja Matic, and you could feel the tumbleweed. It was like, who cares? Yeah. Nobody's bothered. Yeah. And even late September, I went to Solskjaer's hometown and spoke to his best friend. Nobody cared. When I tweeted that I was there was more abuse than praise. These people are now central to Manchester United's resurgence.
Yeah, I must be honest, I thought Matic had just been written off and it was finished. He just reappeared one day and looked quite good again, and now he's doing very well at the base of that midfield. That was an interesting line you had there, Andy, that you're now of the opinion that Solskjaer's on top of the job rather than the job being on top of him. What prompts you to say that? What feel are you getting from him?
I feel like he handles pressure well. Even when things were bad, I didn't see many cracks there, but I feel he's becoming increasingly assertive in what he says to the media. He's more confident in his role. Results help that. It helps you build up a bank of credit. You've not got the wagons circling, which is what happens when results are bad. And I can remember speaking to the Stiff Station on the morning of United against Tottenham in December, and the line was very much, if they don't win tonight, what is going to happen? And I said on that rainy morning, whatever you say about him, he's got a habit of pulling out results when he really needs them. And United did beat Tottenham, and then they beat City away. Solskjaer told me that was his best moment as Manchester United manager. But then, of course, they lose to Watford, who's won 1 in 17 in December. The team had not been able to get the consistency which they're now getting on this unbeaten run, beating all the teams that come before them. And there are little stumbles. Manchester United were not impressive against Norwich on Saturday in the FA Cup, and that maybe shows that the squad isn't as strong as it could be, because when he starts the players on the bench, they struggle to overcome a team like Norwich. And Jose Mourinho was praising the strength of United's bench a few weeks ago at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Not a lot of United fans would fully buy into that, and they would say, why is Andres Pereira playing 37 times this season. So I think there does need to be some strengthening done this season, but United are in a better position than most clubs to do that.
I know you talk to people around the club. United fans had probably over the last 7 years become accustomed to some very so-so signings, and Ed Woodward and the transfer policy has been much discussed. Did Solskjaer, did the scouting network, did they know what they were signing in Bruno Fernandes, or have even they been a little bit surprised?
They knew what they were signing. I think they would have liked to have signed him at the start of the season, but United had signed Bissaka, Harry Maguire and Dan James. And you would think if Fernandes would have joined the club at the start of this season, then they wouldn't be thinking, can we get into fourth, and hoping that Leicester City lose matches. But that's how football is. It's full of what-ifs. I put it to Woodward in October when he gave us that interview for United We Stand. And I said, what on earth is going on with the scouting system? Because it has been less than impressive in the previous 7 years. And he went on this big monologue and he explained what was going on. And it was greeted, not surprisingly, with some scepticism. But the recruitment under Solskjaer has genuinely been good. Signing players is not an exact science, but United are getting signings right. And I remember at the end of January, I got word that Odion Igalo was going to come to Old Trafford, and I put it out there on Twitter. And I looked back at the responses a few weeks ago. Once again, so-called Manchester United fans, completely negative. Why on earth are we signing players from China? Why are we signing Watford rejects? He's scored in every single game that he started. I'm not pretending that Igalo is Lionel Messi, because he's not, but he was brought in because Marcus Rashford was injured. He's brought in to do a job, to be a backup, and he's done that job, and he's doing it really well. And around the club, he's very popular, he's very smiley, and when you get in players who want to be there, who love being there, then that is the opposite of players who maybe aren't happy there, who are a poison in the dressing room. And there's been several of them, and Solskjaer feels that he's got rid of them. He won't name them, but I think everybody knows who he's insinuating about some of the players who are now playing in Italy, and I don't mean Chris Smalling. And it's a happy club, and you're seeing that with the results.
As ever, Paul Pogba's much discussed. He certainly looks happier on the pitch, and I suspect the Fernandes effect is good for him as much as anybody. He's looking around now, and this is a team he can play in and flourish in, I suspect. Do we know what his intentions are? Do we have any indicators what his intentions are? It would seem the club very much want to keep him.
Yeah, I cannot categorically say that Paul Pogba wants to stay at Manchester United and see his contract out. I spoke to him. I know people who were very close to him. I think the messages which came out a year ago absolutely indicated that he wanted to leave the club, and he felt that the dream had been sold when he chose Manchester United over Real Madrid in 2016 had not been realised, and he had his arguments. But you also had maybe 40% of Manchester United fans saying, let him go. No person is bigger than the club. He really divided fans, especially the match-going fans. A lot of them really were not having Paul Pogba up until quite recently, but you know what football fans are like. He's come back, he's playing really well, he's smiling. I thought he was fantastic in the first half at Brighton, and pretty selfless as well, setting up Fernandes and covering a lot of ground all over the pitch. And he'll be advised that football has changed as well, and maybe there's not a queue of clubs waiting to pay the type of money Manchester United would require if they sold him. And they don't want to sell him. They want it to work out with him. He's still a brilliant world-class player, and if him and Pogba can spark, and him and Fernandes can spark and do well, then that's a great prospect for a lot of Manchester United fans.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
But when I got to Liverpool, I thought, right, I've bought myself a nice Aston Martin. I pulled up on the lights alongside Roy Keane, of all people, and I had the shades on. I think I was listening to some Speed Garage. My arm was out the window. I was having myself. And then Roy gave me that look that he's given many of people in his time. And as he sped off into the distance, I was sitting in this car, looked at myself in the mirror and thought, I need to get rid of this.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Missing this?
When that didn't materialise, I think both Paulie and myself probably looked at each other and kind of thought, what next?
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
All right, you're very welcome along. If you've just joined us, you've missed some really good stuff from last night's show that we've been playing out over the last while. But if you want to get involved in any of the conversations that we're having this morning, feel free. You can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number. So that's 0879 180 180. See what we did there? Do you see? Adrian Barry is with us. That's the type of dad joke you like. You might be actually responsible for picking that number.
There was a lot of, I can't quite remember now at the time, but there was certainly a lot of dad jokes made about what the number might be at that time. Yeah.
I don't want to give away...
Big darts man like yourself, Jerry. You know?
I don't want to give away his actual phone number, but Jimmy White's phone number, when you get it, has a lot of 147s in it. It's like, oh, that's pretty, you know. I like what you've done there, Jimmy.
You would, wouldn't you?
I see what you've done. Well, I mean, you know, if you had any level of greatness achieved, you would somehow try and work it. It's the same as a vanity. You've got a vanity car plate, right?
I do remember as a kid driving through England at one point or another. We were over there on holidays and seeing Paul Daniels' car. I can't quite remember what the reg was, but it was quite clearly Paul Daniels. And the main thought I had, I was only a kid, but I remember thinking, what? Like, if you're Paul Daniels, like, do you want people chasing you down the motorway saying, hey, give us a wave? Probably not. I mean, I don't know why you would want to be drawing attention to yourself.
Was it not a little, not a lot? Was that what...
I can't remember what it was. Yeah.
Right,
definitely him.
We have a very busy programme for you this morning. We're going to speak with Daniel Harris about the situation in football at the moment, where it's been an incredible 24 hours for Manchester United. And, you know, all the Man United fans were pretty bleak. Certainly the ones that are in our office and who work on our team were pretty bleak about how the future looked, given how successful Liverpool were last week. And I wonder if things have just kind of turned around pretty quickly tonight. Rather than seeing who is getting the Guard of Honour, they're going to be seeing who's giving the Guard of Honour tonight. So there's humiliation for Manchester City tonight, irrespective of what happens on the field. There was defeats for their main rivals last night in the race for the Champions League, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is the best manager since Jurgen Klopp.
It's been an unbelievable 24 hours, hasn't it? Like, Leicester get beaten, Chelsea get beaten. Like, look, it was a bit of an outlier for Chelsea. I watched the game last night. It was comedy gold, actually, in so many regards. I was making the point on Twitter that, you know, the people give out about these in-game interviews, like what you wouldn't have given for David Moyes' thoughts. To be fair, not quite at half-time, because they'd obviously
just scored
back, but just before half-time, his head looked as if it was about to explode. And to be fair, like, from his position, probably rightly so.
If Moyes gets them out of relegation here, is that his greatest achievement?
I mean, it's in illustrious company, obviously.
Well, qualifying for the Champions League with Everton, not quite qualifying for the Champions League, but the Champions League playoff.
Probably, and they're probably going to do it as well as the thing. If they play or show even a fraction of the spirit they showed last night against all odds, like, it was made for a relegation fodder team to just turn around and say, like, even Moyes was saying as much after the game, like, everything was going against us. It's sort of language you never hear from a manager. You know, normally it's like, well, everything was going against us, but I still believed we'd win it. He was like, no, I thought, Jesus, the way things were going, we were gone. And so they got 3 points last night. And I saw one stat last night saying that they're the only one of that bottom five to have picked up a win since the return. So the teams around them aren't doing anything. They may have already survived. They're on 30 points. He's talking about trying to get to 40.
30 might be enough, turns out. Who knows?
It may well be enough. There's only 5 of them really there. You'd probably discount, I think it's Southampton that might be just above them. But yeah, it'd be an incredible achievement. Absolutely incredible.
It is a slow bicycle race of stunning mediocrity at the bottom of the Premier League table at the moment. Again, if you want to talk to us about United, or want to talk to us about Liverpool, or even the relegation battle, we'd be happy to hear from you this morning. Use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter as well. Here's what's coming up for you on the show. We're going to get to Shane Hannon and bring you up to date on everything that's happening in the world of sport in just a moment. After that, we'll run through the sports pages. Plenty to get stuck into today. The GPA, the pay talks between the IRFU and the Players' Union have had 4 separate rounds and no sign of resolution just yet. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much brinkmanship the players engage in that one. I'm going to talk with Daniel Harris about the football situation over the last 24 hours and what's coming next, and the state of mind that Liverpool are going to be in for the rest of the season as well. Richael Timothy is a Paralympic cyclist, and she's going to talk to us about recruitment for people who might be interested in getting involved in Paralympic sports, and her own story, which is a fairly remarkable story as the former inter-county footballer as well. And then State of the Union today, Keith Wood's State of the Union, where we've been talking with various people, stakeholders in the game of rugby. We've done the women's game, we've done the schools game, we've done the professional game here in Ireland and its history with the chief executive of the IRFU a couple of weeks back. We've done the situation with clubs and commercial stuff in England. Now we're doing the medical side of the game. And so part 1 today is Éanna Falvey, and Dr. James Robson, who's a former Lions doctor for stretching back a bunch of decades, is going to be part 2 of this. So it's a 2-part State of the Union this week. And it's excellent stuff, really excellent stuff. Real kind of brilliant explainer from Éanna Falvey about the level of scientific detail that they got when it came to formulating the protocols for getting teams back into action, and the difference between a reset scrum where people are face to face and a normal scrum where actually you're breathing down, and because you're outdoors, it's probably a relatively safe place for you to be with regards to the spread of the virus. So some fantastic detail from him coming after 9:10 this morning. But first, let's say hello to Shane Hannon this morning. Shane, how are you?
Not too bad, lads. Keeping well yourselves?
Yeah, so you're a Man United fan. We keep saying this. The best 24 hours in the last 7 years?
Really, really strong. I mean, I was watching the Chelsea-West Ham game, and the house erupted when Yarmolenko scored that winner, and I think it's probably the same across houses involving United fans across the country. So you couldn't have really asked for better. Even a draw last night against West Ham would have probably done. Leicester are kind of capitulating a bit, so United fans probably quite confident about catching them at least. But finishing third now is a real prospect. You mentioned as well that the Guard of Honour. I hadn't really thought of that in that perspective, that seeing Manchester City give Liverpool the Guard of Honour makes it a little bit easier. I think it was Gary Neville in 2005 when Chelsea won their first Premier League title and United had to give them the Guard of Honour, and he said something like, it's like your missus leaving you and being asked to hang the new bloke's clothes up in your own wardrobe. So
Wayne Bridge, obviously, go on, sorry. That just popped into my mind, I don't know why.
Well, Chelsea, I guess, yeah. But it's a hard one to take. Roy Keane actually never spoke about that. I think John Giles gave the old Leeds Don Revie team gave Arsenal a Guard of Honour in 1972 as well, went on to hammer them 3-0 at Ellen Road. So there's a psychology to it. It probably pumps teams up to give that Guard of Honour, and then it gives them a reason to go out and give them a spanking.
Yeah, look, all of these little things I think are important little aspects of football history where you either use it or you don't, and it's up to you to decide to embrace it. It's a little bit like the haka, Adrian, I would say. You can say it's completely meaningless here, but like,
I don't know.
How you deal with these things is up to you, and it's such a rare thing in your career, I think. And I'm telling you, the Liverpool fans are dying to see it tonight. Absolutely dying to see it.
I'd be interested. No, I'm fascinated to hear Shane saying that as a United fan, he's delighted to see, I don't care who they are, a team giving Liverpool a Guard of Honour. I'd be interested to know if there's many more United fans that think like that. I think the haka is slightly different in that it's this ongoing, like, pre-match ritual, like, that, gets a team up for it, like, in an unbelievable fashion. This is like a one-off thing. Like, maybe does Guardiola put it in his back pocket and say, remember that Guard of Honour last year? I mean, does that thing still happen in the Premier League anymore? I'm not sure.
I think it absolutely does. How else do you try and motivate City for next season when, assuming they have no Champions League qualifications to play for, the only trophy that matters for them is the Premier League? Do they fold up their tent and go, well, I'm going to get my money anyway, I'm not going to get my Champions League bonus?
Like 3 or 4 unbelievable world-beating players, and you have everybody looking around them going, geez, I'm not going to keep my place here.
Well, Sané's on the way out. Like, I don't know if they are going to have... I mean, maybe some of the kids actually get an opportunity, and it's the best thing that ever happens to Manchester City, and the millions and millions and millions that they've invested in the academy finally begin to show some signs of progress. Shane, at 8:15, maybe you might tell us what happened in the world of sport last night and today.
Yeah, of course, we'll kick off with that Premier League action from last night, lads. West Ham giving their Premier League survival hopes a major boost while denting the Champions League ambitions of Chelsea. Andrei Yarmolenko's last-minute strike giving David Moyes' side a 3-2 win at the London Stadium. Goals from Thomas Souček and Mikel Antonio had previously seen the Hammers lead, with Willian scoring twice for Chelsea, once from the penalty spot. That result sees West Ham climb up to 16th, 3 points clear of the relegation zone. Chelsea remain 4th in the table after their first defeat since the resumption of football. Chelsea boss Frank Lampard says it was a frustrating night for his side.
I've seen us play great games, but then I've seen us have moments, like I keep saying, where there have been opportunities around us to capitalise on a situation, close a gap, jump a team, and that's the difference for us at the minute, and that shows how much work we've got to do.
Meanwhile, the West Ham United manager, David Moyes, was also speaking after the game. He says he isn't getting carried away with his side's impressive result.
Well, it doesn't mean anything really, does it? You know, I think, does it get to 30 points tonight? So I think the next target is it's got to start with a 4, isn't it? If you get a 40, then you'll be safe in the Premier League. I'm sure we will be.
There is now a scrap emerging for Champions League football, just 3 points separating 3rd from 6th. That's after Leicester City were beaten 2-1 against Everton. They're now winless in 4 games since the restart, but remain in 3rd place in the table as things stand. Norwich City are 6 points from safety with 6 games to play after their 4-0 defeat at Arsenal, while Bournemouth are 2nd from bottom after a 4-1 defeat at home to Newcastle. Liverpool, as we've mentioned, will receive a guard of honour at the Etihad Stadium tonight. The newly crowned Premier League champions face the side they disposed, Manchester City. This evening's other game is at Bramall Lane, which sees Sheffield United entertain Tottenham. West Brom are just a point off the top of the championship standings this morning. They cut off the gap on leaders Leeds with a 3-0 win at Sheffield Wednesday. Derby County are within a point of the playoff places, following their 1-0 win at Preston, Wayne Rooney scoring the only goal of the game in that match. 4th place Nottingham Forest strengthened their promotion hopes by beating Bristol City by the same scoreline. Struggling Huddersfield had a much-needed 3-0 win. That was at Birmingham City, while New Middlesbrough boss Neil Warnock looks to make it back-to-back wins since taking charge when his side go to Hull later. The Gaelic Players Association have written to county boards across the country asking them to stop any unauthorised inter-county training sessions. Despite the suspension of inter-county activity until the 14th of September, anecdotal evidence suggests many counties have been in breach of the rules. The Players Association have also written to county boards saying rules around inter-county training are clear and unambiguous. However, they have called for their members to be insured in the event of any unauthorised sessions and have asked for players to be released to their counties. That's once their club championship commitments have been completed. You can read the GPS statement in full at otbsports.com or the new OTB Sports app. You can download that for free via the App Store or the Play Store. To boxing next, Eddie Hearn says Amanda Serrano is shying away from a legacy fight against Katie Taylor. A Twitter spat is ongoing regarding the fight purse, which Hearn says has been engineered by Serrano's management. The matchroom promoter claims Serrano wanted to appear on a reality show in Puerto Rico rather than fight Taylor next month. Hearn says an agreement is close for a rematch with Delphine Persoon instead. Some Manchester United news again. Duo Chris Smalling and Alexis Sanchez have had extensions to their loan spells in Italy. Smalling will stay with Roma until the end of the season, while Sanchez will see out the campaign at Inter Milan. That current Serie A season is due to finish in early August. Ashley Young, Alexis Sanchez and Christian Eriksen all scoring and setting up goals as Inter Milan thrashed Brescia 6-0 yesterday to remain 3rd in Serie A. To golf, Waterford Shim's power in action at the latest event on the PGA Tour from today. The Rocket Mortgage Classic gets underway in Detroit from later this morning. American Chad Campbell, one of a number of competitors to withdraw from the event due to the coronavirus. Finally for me this morning, lads, a bit of racing action this afternoon. A 7-race card at Sligo this evening. The first off there at 4:10. Meanwhile, an 8-race card at Bellewstown gets underway from 1 o'clock.
I'd like to move a motion for us to officially stop calling Detroit and start using the Andy Lee pronunciation of Detroit, which is obviously learned in the Cronk Gym.
Detroit. I'm going to take that with me.
I think we should. I mean, look, it's good enough for Andy. It's good enough for me.
I'm not sure that would be right coming out of Shane's mouth, I have to say, coming from, deepest, darkest Monaghan.
Hey, look, we could all learn, Adrian, just because you're stuck in Athlone or Mullingar or wherever it is,
This accent shaming.
If you're never getting out of there, that's on you,
Accent shaming is not...
I didn't wake up on a Thursday morning to be accent shamed, Adrian.
I love your accent, Shane.
Thanks. I know, Jerry, you have Nordy blood in you, so...
You're not from the north, though.
No, exactly. Tommy tried to make that point yesterday. Or someone tried to make that point yesterday, but it's not true. Monaghan is in the south.
Bertie Ahern, when he was Taoiseach, once did include Monaghan in the 6 counties, and I was like, really? Is that? I mean...
Well, a girl in college asked me where I was from. My first day of college in UCD, and she said, "Where are you from?" She was South Dub, and I said, "I'm from Monaghan," and she said, "Oh, is that in Meath?" which left me feeling a bit upset on my first day of college.
Look, she just knows her ancient Irish history. Wasn't Meath essentially the whole province? Back in the day. Yeah.
You're giving her a lot of credit there, I think.
Here's the thing. I mean, she wasn't really asking you where you're from. She was like, "What school did you go to?" That's the only thing that those people were interested in.
Did you play rugby? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
what school did you go to?
Shane was definitely thrown in the she was a South dub by way of himself reverse shaming.
Possibly.
The whole country's on his side, though, Adrian. It turns out the whole country. 20 minutes past 8 this morning. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
We'll start with OTB Sports this morning. And here you go. We did it for the League of Ireland. Shamrock Rovers chairman Roach. This is from last night's Off the Ball. Speaking with Joe Malloy, we played a good bit of that out for you this morning. So there is a bit of a tribal war in the Babylon going on at the moment between the Rovers, Shamrock versus Sligo. A celebrity deathmatch to see exactly what's going to happen. I've got to say, I think the one up, one down and a playoff seems pretty fair for the entire First Division. I get that it's going to be difficult for those clubs in the Premier League, but I mean, you know, for the integrity of the competition, it seems like it's a fairly straightforward thing. Brilliant interview last night with Jason Holland, ex-Munster, and now, of course, pulling up trees back in his native New Zealand. The best moments of my footy career was, I think, talking about the try in Bordeaux against Toulouse back in, as Munster were really igniting the whole touch paper for the entire European adventure that is the Heineken Cup. Pep said the only United player he'd take was Marcus Rashford. That was Andy Mitten talking last night as well. I'm not entirely sure if that's true anymore, if Bruno Fernandes wouldn't get a game. And weren't they interested in one of those centre-backs? I think they were. And also Eamon Coughlin. I can say, God damn it, I did well in my sport. And yeah, he did. Eamon Coughlin is one of those careers that should really be in contention for a place on Dublin's sporting Mount Rushmore.
The first posters I had up on my wall as a kid, Ger, were Eamon Coughlin and Stephen Roach.
And was Coughlin doing the salute as he ran past was he running past a Russian in Helsinki?
Yeah, that would have been 84, all right?
83, I think, because 84 would have been Olympics year. So
I would have been 6, 7 or whatever. So that would have been. I think you
were 9 then.
It was a Kellogg's. You save up enough barcodes off. Remember that? You save enough barcodes off the Kellogg's box, and you send off, and they send you out these photographs, these posters. They were amazing posters. Anyway. That's my little dip back into memory lane for this morning. The Irish Examiner is very much dominated by reaction to two pieces, really. The GPA statement, obviously, yesterday, and the further fallout from the Michael Duignan interview and Off the Ball during the week as well. First of all, Owen Cormacan at the top of the paper saying that the GPA statement avoids the crux of the issue. This was a reaction to the statement that came from the GPA yesterday. He says that once again they failed to pass judgment on the county teams who are breaching the GA's inter-county training ban. Following that latest statement, Shane brought you details of that just a moment ago. Mike Quirk, the Laois manager, he agrees with the point that if club players are finished with their club interest, then they should go back in with their county. And he says that he was listening to Michael Duignan on with Joe on Off the Ball during the week, and he agreed with almost everything he had to say about leadership from the GA and the lack of it, I suppose. But he challenged the idea that county boards and inter-county management teams are dealing with the return to play situation in bad faith. He said he himself was on the way back from Laois at the time, listening to Michael Duignan and having had conversations there about exactly how they would approach it. And he also says that if people have evidence of counties calling back their players, then be out with it. Let's hear you.
Yeah, so let's just have that GPA conversation now, because it's in all the papers and there's no point in us kind of repeating the headlines and repeating the conversation. GPA are getting absolutely hammered by a large portion of the GAA sport, the GAA media, and a large portion of former players and managers for their role in all this. And I think it poses some fairly interesting questions about what people expect of the GPA. So in many respects, it seems as if they are the organisation who are a lightning rod for a lot of the issues that people have with the GAA. And some of it is because of the funding they get, some of it is because of the... Actually, I'm not sure what the genesis of a lot of it is. I'm not fully on board with the pile-on that's happening on the GPA at the moment. I do accept that they could have done more in this instance, and you would like to see a very clear delineation between them and the GAA on this. They seem very reluctant to criticise the GAA centrally. They are very clear, though, that it is the responsibility of county boards to stop managers from training players. There's also this narrative out there that it's like, you can't possibly say there should be insurance for these training sessions if those training sessions shouldn't be going on. You 100% can. You absolutely can. It's living in the real world from the GPA's perspective to say, these training sessions are happening, we know they're happening, the county board is supposed to stop them, but you need to insure the players. And if they're a player welfare organisation, which they say they are, then the first thing that they should get is insurance for those players. And then after that, when that's done, they can start talking about everything else. For example, you're an inter-county footballer and you're training for County X tonight. You take a punch or an elbow, an accidental one, you lose a tooth. Who's paying for that? At the moment, nobody's paying for that because you're not insured. So the county board are going to foot the bill and you're going to have to chase them for 6 months or 12 months for the couple of grand or the 5 grand or the 10 grand in dental bills. So if I'm a player welfare organisation, I would like that sorted out because I know those training sessions are happening. There's another aspect to this where, yes, they could be saying, players are going on strike. If you're going to force us to play without insurance, we're going on strike. And I don't really know, because I suspect if they did that, the pylon, the leaders of the pylon would be like, who the hell are you to go on strike? I just kind of wonder what everybody wants in the GPA here.
Yeah, I have to say I read the statement yesterday and was kind of scratching my head a little bit about a couple of things. I thought it wasn't authored. I didn't know, was it coming from Paul Flynn? I would have liked to have seen something from Paul Flynn specifically, the guy that I rate particularly highly, I have to say, and I just thought that actually something coming from him directly would have been useful. I think that it very much focused on this narrative, as it was described, of club versus county, and the unfairness of that. Like, don't worry about that stuff. Like, tell us what it is that you're actually saying here. What is the GPA's stance on this thing? I thought it was a weak enough statement. One of the things that I frequently, when the GPA are called on to give a view on something like this, they will survey the players, right? So they'll give themselves, they clearly already have a mandate, but they'll give themselves a specific mandate to do with a specific topic. So tell us, 64% of our players are saying that they would X, Y, or Z. Like, let's hear from that. That would have been a real credible way to have actually moved the story on away from club versus county. Tell us what the players actually, what they think about this. It's obviously stemming from a lack of clarity from the very outset about whether players, once they're done with their club teams, are or are not allowed to go back with the county teams. Like that, it struck me that that is something that could be, in a statement from Croke Park, very quickly decided upon. And then obviously then after that you're dealing with the players who are still involved with their clubs and are also going back with the county teams, which is not part of the recommendations at all. So yeah, I don't know, like I think two things. I think that I would have liked to have seen something like a survey or something that gave us actually some sort of an insight into what the GPA's membership are actually thinking about this. And the other thing is that I wonder would it be possible for every county board in the country to issue a statement with their position, right? So what you would end up with is, I would imagine, a vast majority of counties saying our county teams are not training until such point as the club championships are finished, and suddenly you'll be able to go A, B, C, and D. We haven't heard from you.
It's a good idea. I mean, it's a good idea, and maybe we'll actually just ask every county board, what is your official status? Are you obeying the rules or not? I do think the big issue here is, and the GA have continued to say that they're monitoring the situation, as opposed to actually what we said last week isn't correct. There will be ramifications if you break this. Like, we the whole today's not the day for us to talk about punishment. It's like, well, it actually was. It's like face masks on the buses. People aren't going to do it unless you force them to. It was like the roads, people were driving around and then the cops came out and started having checkpoints and going, where are you going? Can you prove that you're going to work? And it was like, yeah, I actually can. And then suddenly there were no cars in the roads. If you enforce rules, Colin O'Rourke made the point as a school principal, if I don't enforce rules, there's no point to those rules. And still, like, the GA are like, oh, we're keeping a watching brief on this to see exactly what happens. And I get Mike Quirk's point. It looks like we're tarring everybody with the same brush. He drives up to Laois to give a coaching seminar to all of the club coaches, and as far as I know, Mayo have done something fairly similar according to what Nathan was saying on the show yesterday. That's, to be honest, that's, I think, where the focus of this should be. It's up to Croke Park to fix the fixtures. It's up to Croke Park to impose rules and then have sanctions for them.
Yeah, and look, I agree, and I think that like the watching brief, I think is totally fine. Like everybody now accepts that we're in a situation that is totally unprecedented. Like you can make a statement on day one that by day 12 you might have to go back on. Everybody understands that these are not typical circumstances. So once it becomes clear that that first directive from Croke Park is not actually covering all bases, just come out again and give some clarity. Like it's fine. Nobody's sitting in judgment. You've not been forced by I don't know if that's part of the rationale behind Croke Park not coming out to give clarity or to give further statements on it, is that, well, we don't want to be pressurised by the media to do whatever. Like everybody understands that we're now, hopefully coming out the other end of the pandemic. These are not typical times. It's fine.
It's true, but like Michael Duignan is the Offaly County Board chairman, so he wasn't speaking as a pundit on the show the other night. He was actually speaking as a dyed-in-the-wool member of the GAA who wants to make sure that everybody's playing from the same playing field. So we know Offaly are doing that. We know Derry are obviously not giving their players to the county management until Kieran Shannon says Clare are doing exactly the same. It's Leicester obviously in the papers today saying we're not taking our players until at least they're out of the championship, which seems all fair enough. So you're kind of, by the process of elimination, getting fairly close to knowing that there are some high-profile counties who are probably not obeying the rules. Now, one of the things I think that there might be a role for the GPA in here is getting their players to say which of the counties there are, so that they can actually go public with the fact that we've had reports from players in 4 or 5 different counties. Maybe that leads to a situation where players aren't being trusted by management. But again, look, that's how it works in the NFL. That's how this works in other organisations, in other sporting bodies around the world, where there is somebody whose job it is to keep an eye that the players are actually being treated properly.
Yeah.
And look,
I think as well, Ger, right? Like I think that anecdotally you hear that there were some counties that went back to train. And then obviously all this furore kicked up, and they went back on that. Like, that's all right. You made a mistake, and then you heard the rationale as to why you shouldn't be doing that.
But you broke the rules. You broke the rules, and there should be some punishment for that. And actually, it shows that you don't really care about your players as much as you say you do. You're not really a players person if you're asking your players in the middle of a global pandemic to congregate in groups, are you?
Look, it's a fair point, but as to the previous point that I'm making about it being an unprecedented times, like I think you might have made the point just now or earlier in the show about it being there's a cultural thing in the GAA. How can I slightly bend the rules to my favour here? So it's not an easy thing to wash out pandemic or no pandemic. So all I'm saying is that I think that there would have been counties that went back a bit early and then suddenly went, oh crap, actually this is probably not the right thing to do, and they made a bit of a balls up. Like, It's what I'm saying is we're now only into July. This thing isn't supposed to end in terms of getting back with the intercounty teams until September the 14th.
It's quite far away, isn't it?
Yeah. So so you made a mistake for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks. Grand. Let's move on from that. But it's the spirit of cloak and dagger, isn't it?
I wonder is there actually a hybrid where you're allowed to train with the county in a group once a week, and the rest of the time you have to be with your club? Is there some kind of way these two things can coexist happily, or is it like all or nothing? And maybe, look, I think they decided that it was all or nothing, and it's 100% club and nothing else, and that's the way they want to go for it. But, Rory yesterday had a good point on the show when he was talking about, Rory Gallagher was talking about, there's nothing wrong with club players who play for their county wanting to be as elite as they possibly can be. And it's them driving the desire to train really well. And maybe the initiative that Leicester are doing and that Mayo are doing, where the expertise that you have at senior inter-county level is being transfused back into the club scene. They should have always been doing that, but again, we learn new things really quickly when we're up against the wall like we are at the moment in the midst of this pandemic. So we got to one paper so far, I think. Everything else is essentially about that, though. Goal from last night. That's Yarmolenko at the very last minute. Guardiola rules out Sancho bid as he prepares to rebuild City, and GPA tell county boards clubs should come first. Flynn's note lays out clear and unambiguous return date, but public statement insists players must be ensured to train with their counties before then. I don't think that it's in any way contradictory to say that if you're going to break these rules, you have to look after our players. I think that's like living in the real world, and you can say that it's contradictory if you want, but it's not.
The Times Ireland shot of Yarmolenko after his winning goal last night for West Ham. Gary Jacob writes there about his stunning late goal to boost West Ham's survival hopes, obviously, at the bottom. Matt Lawton has a story that the Black Lives Matter logo is going to remain on shirts. This is a story I was unaware of before reading this morning. Despite what are described as concerns about statements from Black Lives Matter UK, he says there that they've called for a reduction in police funding and have been critical of Israel. So the topic comes up at government level, where the Premier League chief Richard Masters was asked by MPs this week whether it was a good idea for the Premier League to continue to support the campaign, and he made the point of difference that it's there is a big difference between the morals and the politicals of this, and so they are going to continue with it. And also one final story from the Times Ireland there. England cricketers asking their overlords to play crowd noise and music at their test against the West Indies at Lord's, which begins next week, writes Elizabeth Ammon.
So the match reports essentially on the lead page of the Irish Times this morning. The Leicester slump is something that's probably worth getting into, because Brendan Rodgers' reputation was obviously sky high. And look, he might rescue this season just yet. They still might qualify for the Champions League, which would be a fairly phenomenal achievement. But Gavin Comiskey has this story. Impasse continues as no deal reached in fourth round of pay talks. This is not a great situation for the IRFU at the moment. So he's got some good detail here. Michael Costello, the managing director of BDO, chartered accountants and tax expert Kieran Medler, are leading discussions on behalf of the players with IRFU Director of Finance Conor O'Brien. So they're very heavy hitters that the players have on their side going into these conversations. And, you know, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to see exactly how those conversations are going at the moment. So they were granted access to the union's book so players could understand the true financial state of Irish rugby. Philip Brown and his RPI counterpart Simon Keogh are also involved in the ongoing discussions. So it seems as if the financial crisis prompted the union to initially ask 20% pay cuts across the board. It'll be interesting to see exactly what kind of deal is struck here in the end. Rob Carney, Johnny Sexton and Peter O'Mahony are also on the board that Simon Keogh was reporting back to, so they're not actually in the room when the negotiations are happening. And Peter O'Mahony wasn't taking any questions on that yesterday. But yeah, so some kind of framework for pay cuts. All the while, what's happening at Leicester City or Leicester Tigers is very interesting. So Manu Tulagi, it seems, is gone. 6 players have been released because they wouldn't agree to pay cuts. Kyle Eastman, Greg Bateman, and former Leinster centre Noel Reid are also have been released. So a fairly sensational development coming there, and it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what happens as well. So again, the FAI board are meeting to decide what the future of the League of Ireland is going to be. They had anticipated that the July 31st date that they had published had been accepted by the clubs, but given that Sligo Rovers and a few other clubs have written to them now, they're going to consider exactly what to do over the next while. So that is the Irish Times for you this morning.
The Irish Daily Star, hammer blow for Chelsea and a spinning Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who scored again last night. Arsenal 4-0 win over Norwich. The quickest player I had read in this piece to reach 50 Premier League goals for Arsenal. And he's out of contract in a year in classic Arsenal fashion. Paul Brown tells us there. And Mikel Arteta saying that he's my boy, I want to lock him in. But, you know, he's having conversations with the powers that be at Arsenal, and it'll really be up to them and his agent to get this sorted. So he's slightly distancing himself, maybe rightly so, from being central to that conversation. But really a player that Arsenal obviously need to hang on to. We've Mark McCadden on that League of Ireland standoff, and Jurgen Klopp summoning the spirit of the All Blacks to help his side see out the season. He watched the All Blacks documentary when he was in Germany a few years ago. Loves their ethos. He's all about cleaning out the sheds. And that's what Liverpool are going to do for the rest of the season.
The Mirror, back page of the Mirror for you this morning is Justice. Hammers fight back after dodgy VAR decision to sink Blues and boost survival bid. And then Pep vow, I will rebuild my city. This is despite the fact he said he's not going to get Jadon Sancho. Runner Nadia Powers accused the IOC of being tone deaf after athletes were banned from protesting at next year's Tokyo Games. And GPA passed the book, is the headline on Pat Nolan's piece. The GPA has washed its hands of the inter-county training fallout. The players' bodies come under increasing pressure for its silence in the rogue training sessions that have been called by several inter-county bosses, despite this being a club-only period until September 14th. That's the interpretation of it there in the Mirror this morning.
The Irish Sun, Martin Blackburn also has that story about Pep ruling out any chance of Jadon Sancho rejoining City. Sanch, no. would be up there if Sheehan was there, would be talking about it as possibly tab of the morning, but it's only outdone also by the Sun with Yar beats VAR.
They're all rubbish. They're all rubbish.
Yar beats VAR. Like, there's nothing more. The best three words that totally sum up both from a comedy point of view and actually what happened in that West Ham game last night. And one line here from Derek McGregor, an exclusive, that Celtic have done all they can to bring Fraser Forster back from Southampton to Celtic. They've made a good bid, but it seems he's staying put, and Celtic are now looking at other options.
The Mail, back page of the Mail is don't blame us. GPA say onus is on counties with breaches. Hammer time for Yarmolenko. You're an MC Hammer fan, I presume.
Do. Does that answer your question?
Keep going.
That's all you're getting. You
had the rip-off pants, I presume, did you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They were buttoned up. Am I right?
I think so. Yeah. Nitty gritty is banned as Sky review phrases. Sky Sports have warned commentators not to use certain phrases with nitty gritty on the banned list. Apparently, this is due to racially sensitive overtones. Okay, so apparently nitty gritty has links to slavery as a term used by slave traders to refer to the detritus left after a slave ship was emptied, although that is disputed. But Sky have a full list of things. And look, anything that progresses our understanding and deepens our understanding of stuff that is offensive to people, then we should have those conversations, right? This is all very straightforward. I mean, I realise that there is outrage in pockets of the internet about us having to change how we speak, but like, language has always been an evolving, living thing, and we all have to learn. It's very straightforward. Teach me, let me learn, let's all move on, and away we go.
Yeah, as like white people, given the history of the planet, we have to be able to hear these conversations and understand them reasonably and react to them. That was one I was aware of, but there we go. The Guardian, meanwhile, the Hammer House of Heroes on West Ham's win over Chelsea yesterday. David Heitner exclusive, that I haven't seen this elsewhere, that the Premier League are to charge newly promoted clubs £8 million next season and the season after to help soften that blow of the fall off in broadcast revenues. Effectively, clubs, they're obviously charging clubs who would have had no involvement in the Premier League to foot the bill here. Promotion, however, like you hear the 8 million figure and you're like, geez, that's a lot, and it's very unfair. But to be fair, promotion is worth 180 million quid to clubs. So, you know, it looks like the Premier League are going to deduct that 8 million at source. It's a fraction of the overall promotion windfall, so you know they can probably stomach that. And Jared Marr with an exclusive also in the Guardian that the first fans that are going to get into England rugby games are going to be corporate tickets. So the RFU's reserved the first 28,000 attendees to games for corporate contracts, and unless the government decides that there'll be crowds of over 30,000 at games, which at this juncture seems unlikely, but I mean if things continue to progress, who knows? They'll be all corporate tickets. It's a lot of prawn sandwiches.
Yeah, but look, any port in a storm, you know. It's, I think it'll be very interesting to see exactly what happens because the RFU's finances are not in a very good state, and if the only tickets and the only fans they have are going to be corporate, then maybe it'll be very interesting to see that that's the true spiritual home of English rugby. There's an amazing story in the Telegraph here this morning. I don't know if you can see this. Jones ponders stunning raid for Auckland number 8, Tutu, the next All Black sensation. That Jones is Eddie Jones, the head coach of England, after it's emerged that the 21-year-old sensation who's been tearing up trees in Super Rugby since it has returned, Hoskins Tutu of the Auckland Blues, has revealed he qualifies for England via his mother. He's 21, absolutely sensational, and through his mum, he may well be able to play for England. So Eddie Jones is in Japan at the moment, and he's already recruited 2 players from Super Rugby sides in New Zealand who may or may not end up being part of his plans into the future. But I've got my dad's Fijian heritage, that Kiwi side, and my mum is English as well, so I do qualify for an English passport.
So you should like snub them all and go and play for Fiji?
Well, I mean, if World Rugby was serious about the future of the game, it would turn those islands teams into proper global forces, and we'd have loads of games of high quality instead of just having an amazing concentration in New Zealand and Australia. And now it turns out England and France with their great players. And sure, look, we've got Hawaiians playing for Munster and New Zealanders playing for Ireland.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Eddie Jones is the new Jack Charlton. Sure, that's the main takeaway from this morning's show so far. The Racing Post from me, Richard Forrester writes here that trainer Emmett Mullins has been fined €6,000 under the non-triers rule for his handling of the shunter. Finished fourth at Tipperary yesterday and had also picked up fines of $5,000 last month for a breach of COVID return regulations. And also James Milton on the back page on relentless reds, showing no sign of slowing.
Okay, well, let's just get to the OTB Sports app for you here this morning. Look, the best place to consume our content is on our shiny new app. It's a brilliant piece of kit. You open it up and it opens on your feed as decided by you. You just click on the little human being in the top right-hand corner and you can adapt that for yourself. And then you can move on and listen to the radio station, which is live all day. Listen to the whole thing yesterday. It was absolutely sensational content from our archives and from our live stuff as well. And then you can watch video. Of course, you can subscribe to any of our podcasts and set notifications so that as soon as we update it, you get to binge on the top quality sports content that we create here. Free, gratis, and for nothing. You can get it in the Play Store and you can get it on the App Store on iTunes as well. I want to tell you about our brilliant competition. Tomorrow, at high noon tomorrow, we're giving away €1,000 in cash. If you know your football, you can share in this prize, or maybe if you're the only person who gets all 15 questions correct, you can take the full grand. They're pretty difficult, so we've had a couple of weeks where the prize rolled over. Last week it was $2,000 and 4 people shared, got £500 each. Quiz.otbsports.com. The show will start around about 11:30. Join us for that, but make sure you're online at 12 o'clock and ready to go. The questions are too quick to Google, so this isn't a Google challenge. This is a Know Your Football challenge, and it's brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Now, we want to talk about the Premier League, which obviously tonight was supposed to have one of the games of the season. The games between Liverpool and Manchester City have been very, very high quality matches over the last couple of seasons. Great goals, great pace about the game, great technical ability, but tonight it doesn't actually mean that much. I'm delighted to say we've got Daniel Harris with us to talk a little bit about what's going to happen and the impact of, or the importance of this game really in the context of what's coming next and next season. Does this game mean anything, Daniel, tonight?
Yeah, I think so. Games always mean something. It kind of depends a little bit what the managers do, because I remember I was thinking about a similar game in 2007 at the end of the season when Manchester United went to play Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. And it was thought that might be a big title decider, but as it happened, United were champions already. And at that point, the manager has options. And what Alex Ferguson decided to do was, partly because his team were knackered and had a cup final, he picked a second team involving the likes of Chris Eagles and Alan Smith and Dong Fan Zhu and Kieran Lee. And what I think part of the reason he did that was because the team were knackered. But the other part of the reason was he knew, as well as everyone else knew, that John Terry and Frank Lampard, giving those guys a guard of honour, would be extremely funny, which it was. But the game of football itself was terrible and it was 0-0. I don't think that will happen tonight, because I think that Liverpool want to keep winning and they want to get as many points as they can and they want to break the points record. And I think City, they won't want to get embarrassed. And they also do have big games to come. They're still in the FA Cup and they're still in the Champions League, but they need to play themselves into some kind of form. And really, they should be ashamed of conceding the league in the way that they did against Chelsea. They should have made Liverpool win it on the pitch against them. And from a City point of view, they should have tried to go and give Liverpool a thrashing to say that we're better than you.
Yeah, I'm definitely in two minds about if I'm Liverpool chasing those targets, because say you chase those targets relentlessly over the next couple of weeks and somebody does a cruciate and misses the first 6 months of next season, I would be like, maybe we should have actually just played a mixture of B team and told everybody, win, play, I don't really care, there's no fans, it's grand, we've won our league title, and we're going to make sure that our sports science, which seems to be very on point, will allow us to be absolutely at pitch perfect note on day one of the next season.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be altogether surprised if they did that, but the way that Jurgen Klopp has been talking about his team and talking up their mentality and talking up their desire and saying we don't even understand how much his team want to win, that doesn't suggest that that's what he'll do. And I guess in some ways he's probably a bit less cynical than someone like Alex Ferguson. I mean, that's certainly the image that he presents. And whilst the image that he presents and what his media image and what we actually see of him are not necessarily exact bedfellows, I think that he would be more inclined to try and win the game. I might be wrong, but
I think you're right. I just wonder, is it the right thing to do? And like, it's such a high pressure, such a high intensity game they play. I can see the case for stepping everything down and having an extended pre-season, giving yourself that advantage. So some of the rugby players, for example, that are in the papers today are specifically talking about how these 4 or 5 months off are going to give them a period at the end of their career where they feel like they might get an extra season out of it. It's like a mini sabbatical for them. I can see the benefits of taking Mo Salah out of the front line and saying, you've had non-stop football and pressure. You played in a World Cup injured. And how about we start next season and you get the Ballon d'Or next year, because we're going to give you all the rest and recuperation that you need to heal your body and heal your mind and come back as the greatest footballer in the world.
He might do that. I think that in the back of his mind, certainly in the back of my mind, if I were him, would be that if he picks a second team, do they really want City coming and giving them a hiding? And if he does pick a second team, then that is possible. I mean, City could give a hiding to a first team if City had a good day and the first team had a bad day. So he might start resting players thereafter, thinking that basically it is possible for Liverpool to keep winning games, even if they don't have all their players available. But for this one, I think that the chances are that he will feel that it's unlikely that anyone will do a cruciate and be out for a year. And I think that he would want to celebrate winning the title at Anfield in as proper a fashion as he can manage, which is not a proper fashion at all. But I would expect Liverpool to go strong tonight, but perhaps not thereafter.
Go on, Adrian. Sorry.
How tied up, I wonder, is the greatness of this Liverpool team in what happens from here on out? Like, you're obviously right. I think tonight that they're going to go for it no matter what happens. Like, and it's also too close to having actually clinched the title to take the foot off the gas now. I see from the fixture list they have Brighton and Villa upcoming as well, and that's it with their involvement over the next maybe week or 10 days. That's it with their involvement with that relegation battle as well. So I wonder, in the context of all that, how tied up is the greatness of this Liverpool team in what happens between now and the end of the season?
Not at all, in my opinion. I think that they've won the league and they won the Champions League last year. If they can do either of those two things next season, or both, or keep going, then they'll be a great team. I wouldn't measure greatness really in points, because the way that seasons work are different. So if you look at what's going on below Liverpool, the answer is not a lot. City's title defence hasn't been great, and the teams below them, Leicester have barely won a game since Christmas. Manchester United barely won a game before Christmas. Chelsea keep chucking results away. The standard below them, they're not the best iterations of these teams. And that is one of the reasons that Liverpool have got so many points. Of course, one of the other reasons is they've been relentless and they found a way to win so many games where they haven't played particularly well, and so many games by the odd goal. But to me, you don't really measure greatness in quantity of points over a season, but in success and glory, and repeated success and glory, and the way that teams negotiate big games and the way that teams negotiate pressure. So I personally, if Liverpool played a reserve team in every game for the rest of the season and lost them all, I wouldn't conceive of them any differently to if they played their first team and they won them all, because their achievement is already enshrined in the annals of football history. And what they need to do now to go on to be a great team, if they do go on to be a great team, is to win again next season and the season after.
You don't believe, do you, just listening to reading between the lines of what you're saying there, you've avoided saying that Liverpool are a great team. You don't believe that they are?
Are Liverpool a great team yet? No, I would say not. I think they're a really, really excellent team. But I would say to be a great team, you need to win more than one league in a row. That's what the Champions League obviously is important, and you need. So I think over the course of being a great team, you need to at some point find your way to win a Champions League, really, if you want to be talked about amongst the very best. So City did amazing things in the league the last couple of seasons, but they haven't won the Champions League. So at that point, you start to look at, if you're talking about great teams, then inevitably you're having to compare them to other great teams. And you compare, and then you look at what other great teams have done, and the other teams that I would consider great teams have won Champions Leagues. And so at some point in the course of being a great team, you need to find your way to win a Champions League. Liverpool have done that, but you also, I think, need to find your way to retaining a league title. So for me, the best teams that I've seen are the teams that have won consecutive league titles and at some point happened upon the Champions League. So in the Premier League era, That is United's team of 99 to 01 and 07 to 09. And Chelsea, I would have Mourinho's first Chelsea team next, because they retained the league title, and then some years later, even though it was kind of different players, most of the key players eventually found their way to winning a Champions League as well. Whereas for Liverpool, I think that they've had a great season. They've had one of the great seasons. But to be a great team, I think that they need to win. They need to add another title to that. And if they add another title to that, and they've gone Champions League, Champions League champions, then I don't really see how you could argue with that.
I think for me, they're already there, given that they were Champions League final, Champions League plus record points against a record-breaking Man City team, and then win the league so easily and crushed the league this year the way they did. But look, we're kind of splitting hairs.
No, I understand that. I totally understand that. That's why I said they've had a great season. But for me, the things that I would be ranking, how many points you get in winning the league is not necessarily a reflection of how great you are. It's also a reflection, it might reflect how great you are, but it's also a reflection of what's going on in the league.
Yeah, I think how many points you win against everybody else by if there's literally nobody who can stick with you for 7 games, they've lapped the field so quickly. But look, we're getting bogged down in that. I think that we can come back to that this time next year when they've retained the title, and it's like, okay, they're 100% a great team at this stage. But one last thing about tonight's game, the Ryan Giggs goal against Arsenal in the Cup semi-final seemed to set Arsenal back, to rock them on their heels for a couple of years. It took them a while to regroup. It kind of shocked their identity a little bit into, now, eventually they make their comeback. Is there any aspect of Liverpool that tonight are thinking, let's bury City here. Let's just make them have in their heads the fact that we are not going away. And even when we're celebrating, even the week that we're like a little bit off it in training and everybody's having the crack as opposed to actually going at it and being tense into this, that we drag them into the deep end and we drown them tonight.
That's why I said I think that Klopp will pick a full-strength team. I'm absolutely certain that they'll want to make a statement, not just for now, but for next season. And they'll also know that City might not be at it because, they weren't at it against Chelsea when they should have been. So it's hard. And City and Guardiola teams in the past have been quite fickle. And I think that this City team are not always great under pressure against another good team. They were brilliant under pressure at the end of last season when they needed to win every game. But in the course of the genesis and the superiority and the hegemony of this City team, we've seen that they've lost under pressure. And I think that Liverpool will be definitely trying to do that. In the first instance, they'll just be trying to win. But I don't think that it'll be exactly, let's go and bury this lot. I think because they know that basically that is unlikely. But I certainly think that they'll be looking to make a statement and to set City back. But at the same time, they'll know that City will spend money in the summer and they'll be back again next season. And Liverpool will have to do it again next season. And it's hard to defend the title because very few teams do.
The momentum of United, obviously, is the other thing. The last 24 hours has been unbelievable. Like, the losses they couldn't have scripted this any better. Like, the losses for, Ger mentioned a bit earlier in the show, it's been the greatest 24 hours in the history of, the recent history of Manchester United.
Last seven seasons, Adrian, don't get me wrong.
Last 7 seasons, there we go. Let's not I don't want to misrepresent your point here. But it's been unbelievable. Like, this is, suddenly, all the momentum was with Manchester United to the point where, look, last night was a bit of a blip for Chelsea. I don't know what was going on, but looking at the game last night, it looked as if West Ham had the opportunity to score at every single opportunity, at every single break, and pretty much did, whether they were ruled out or in. But I don't really expect that to continue. But at the same time, what an incredible 24 hours for United.
I've taken a lot of aggravation for constantly saying on here that, as far as I can see, Solskjaer has a plan, and judge him when he's got on midfield and watch the players improve. And just talk about United briefly. That is what we've seen. We've seen he's now got a midfield, and we've seen almost every player improve. And what he's done is he has turned United from a team that was on its arse with players playing out of their arse in just over a year. He's turned them into a team that you can now expect to win the games that they should win. And they were winning big games more or less since the beginning, but they were chucking away points against teams who didn't have as talented players because they were unbalanced. And that's no longer the case. As far as Chelsea go, I think what we've seen with Chelsea throughout the season and what Frank Lampard pretty much said last night is they don't defend well. And when you don't defend well, in the Premier League, like most teams have a player or two who can hurt you. And West Ham have that. Mikel Antonio was excellent last night. The way that they manufactured their winner was brilliant, and it was a great finish from Yarmolenko. And West Ham have players who can hurt you if they're committed. And Chelsea don't defend well, and that is pretty much the reason why they don't win games that they should win. And ultimately, I think now United are probably favourites to come third because they're on a roll, and the games that they have to come are against teams you would expect them to beat. And the current format of games is extremely biased in favour of teams who play a technical game, like United do, who have better technical players, because what you've got no crowd. So inferior teams aren't getting adrenaline from the crowd, and also they're physically not capable of charging around and putting it extra in because they're not as fit as they ordinarily would be. It's hot, and you've got the better team, and you've got 5 subs, which means the better teams with the stronger benches can change things if they're not getting their own way. So all of those things feed into the good teams beating the less good teams, and United only have the less good teams to play until they play Leicester on the last day, and they're winning. So I would expect United should probably get third from here, is what I would say. Although I think what we see with Leicester is that they won't play as badly again as they did in the first half yesterday. The first half against Everton, it felt like Leicester hit rock bottom there, and then they came out in the second half and they were much better, and on another day, they might have got a point. They played well enough to score 2 goals, I would say, in that second half. So I think that Leicester will be better, but they will also be able to feel it slipping away. And they've put a lot into this season, and it looked like we were pretty much secure in third, but they've been so bad since Christmas that they no longer are, and that is a lot of pressure for them to play under. And not all of those players would have played under that pressure before, and some will respond, and some won't respond. So it was a great 48 hours for United, but at the same time, we're not in a position yet where we can say, well, we can absolutely rely on this sort of players to do what we expect them to do, because they haven't been doing it for very long, and they've had good runs before and then collapsed. But the players look a bit better now, and the difference in some ways between United and Chelsea is that when you looked at United's squad last summer, you could see they needed 2 midfield players, really. They needed probably a striker, a winger. But what they actually did was they spent more or less all the money that they had on defence. And I wasn't particularly in favour of doing that at the time. I knew that they needed a right back, and I knew that they needed a centre-back, but I felt like they could escape with not spending that money on defence if they spent the money on the midfield and the attack. But on the rationale that they would score more goals, so the opposition would have to score more goals to take points off them, and the ball would be kept away from the defence. But I think what Solskjaer did was he felt that you build a team from the back, which I don't think is a hard and fast rule, but I can understand why you would treat it as a rule. And so he bought two very expensive defenders, and you can't argue that it hasn't worked. It has worked. They don't concede very many goals, and that is a significant difference between them and Chelsea, is that they're now not conceding very many goals at all, and it means that you don't have to do that much to win. Although, as it happens, the attack's also working.
Daniel, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us today. You can expect the Liverpool fans in your timeline correcting your opinion about their greatness.
They've had a great season. They could well go on to be a great team, but yeah, like retain league titles is one of my standards. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
Fair enough. It's coming. It's coming. All right. Good stuff.
I'll see you again.
Daniel Harris with us this morning there, giving us some thoughts on the current situation. If you're a Man United fan, we'd like to hear from you as well. You can use the hashtag OTB. And if you're a Man City fan, I'd specifically like to hear about how you're doing. You okay, hon? Question mark. Up next this morning here on OTB AM, we're going to be joined by Richael Timothy, a former inter-county footballer who's now one of Ireland's most exciting Paralympic athletes. But first, let's hear from Eamon Coughlin with Joe on last night's OTB. Here he is on the aftermath of his failures at the Olympics.
I know you were famously on the cover of Sports Illustrated 3 times, I think, which as a marker of fame, especially in that era, is a decent marker. So what was your lifestyle like across, say, 70s and 80s? Are you living in the States? Are you making big money being on this circuit? Are you a big deal? Are you a well-known athlete? Are you in the top 100 or 200 known athletes across the States, or am I overstating things? What was your life like then?
Well, I appeared on the stage of Radio City Music Hall the night of 100 stars. So I was in the top 100 sports stars. That was with Muhammad Ali and a few great champions of the world back in America. And I think because of the likes of even Ronnie Delaney and myself being Irish, Madison Square Garden brought an awful lot of Irish people out. And Madison Square Garden was regarded as, and the Wanamaker Mile was regarded as the Olympic, event of the entire indoor circuit. And life for me back then in college was literally just you get up, you eat, you train, you eat, you go to school, you have lunch, you go to school, you go to train, you go to eat, you go to the library, and you go to bed. And it was the same 24/7, except for the weekends where you'd still be running twice a day, but you just did a little bit of studying or you just took it easy. And when I graduated from Villanova, I was fortunate enough to have won the NC2A championships, break some collegiate records, and began to make a name for myself. And life for me, after 76, I worked with the Irish Tourist Board. I got a job here in Dublin, and I was living 50% in the States and 50%, say, in Europe. Europe being the summer season where I compete in Europe. And then in the winter, I would train in San Diego and race around on the American circuit. And then from 1980 on, I was living full-time in New York. I was still working for the Irish Tourist Board. I had my wife and I had 2 children, eventually 4, but I left the Irish Tourist Board because I was able to pursue a career as a professional athlete. Instead of going into work, 9 o'clock or 9:30, getting permission to go in late and leaving at 4:30 to train, I was now able to become a full-time professional athlete. And I trained from home. The track was near my house. The trails in the woods were near my house. And it was just training in the morning, training in the afternoon, rest in between, look after the kids, but it's pure focus on 100% being a professional athlete. And I was lucky enough at the time, because I was winning, I was making good money as a professional runner, and I didn't have to worry about a job thereafter.
Great stuff from Eamon Coughlin speaking with Joe last night. You can get that on the OTB Sports app. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store. Now, Cycling Ireland want to recruit you. Cycling Ireland's para-cycling development programme are at the moment trawling for new talent to represent Ireland at Paralympic Games. If you qualify or if you're interested, they can help make it a reality. Cycling Ireland's high-performance para-cycling programme was the most successful programme in Rio 2016 with 5 medals, including 2 gold. And our next guest discovered para-cycling by chance and went on to win bronze at the World Championships in February 2020, just less than 2 years after joining the programme. Richael Timothy, good morning to you. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm good now.
So your story is fairly remarkable in that you were an inter-county Gaelic footballer, but you end up having international success as a cyclist. How did you first realise that you were actually qualified to compete as a Paralympic cyclist?
Yeah, so I was a footballer, but in 2016 I sustained like a brain injury following a procedure that basically led to me losing the power on the right side of my body. So up to that, I was fully able-bodied, and I had known about parasport, but I didn't realise, I didn't know what the details about it would say. So then, following on from that, in 2017, I suppose I realised that I wasn't going to get the power back on my right side, no matter what rehabilitation I was doing or whatever. So I just got in contact, I suppose, with Cycling Ireland through my GP, who told me that you should look into parasport, seeing as you have an acquired brain injury, you'd qualify. And at the time, I didn't realise I would, so I just looked it up, and I was kind of going through different sports that might suit me or that I could do. And I couldn't run, and swimming wasn't really an option. So I always had a bike when I was younger, so I said, sure, I'll look into cycling. And I just got in contact with the development coach, Cathal Miller, and he just said, come down to a TT, and that was the start of it then.
So in terms of the actual level of power that you lost in your right side, what was the scale of that? How much of an impact did it have?
Yeah, so I basically about 30% will say function on my right side. So what happened was I just basically woke up one day and I had lost the power on my right side nearly completely. So from that then I was just rehabilitating it. So basically as physios looking at me, it looked like I had a stroke. So they were trying to get as much power back. But the way it works with the brain anyways, after 18 months, if the power isn't back, or you kind of need to take that as your new baseline. So that's what I did. But now, I'm just trying, you can still strengthen a bit, but once the neurological part is there, it cuts off, we'll say, power. So say I'm doing a race, for example, and I might be 20 minutes into the race and then I can feel my right side getting really fatigued, like, and then it's completely my left side working. So yeah, it's neurological. So it could be good one day and it mightn't be so good the next day. So
what's that like in terms of the level of frustration that you have as somebody who had been super competitive up to that point to go through that experience?
Yeah, I suppose because I was always so into sport and that, it was frustrating in that even walking, like if I wasn't concentrating fully on what I was supposed to do, I'd nearly trip, like, and even now I need to be fully concentrating on what I can do and that. So it leads to massive fatigue in that every step I walk or everything I'm doing, I need double the concentration that somebody else would need. So yeah, for a while it was just frustrating, like you'd forget sometimes. So like we'll say it was raining, I'd nearly go to run and you'd nearly trip, like, and then be like, oh crap, I can't, like. So yeah, but you get used to it and there's a lot of things you can adapt to do without. And luckily for me, I was always left-handed, so I didn't have to train my left hand, we'll say, because my right hand I wouldn't have used for much things, just I was naturally left-handed, so that was kind of beneficial, the only benefit I could take out of it, I suppose.
And how quickly did you get into the cycling then? What was that process like? So the GP says here, listen, you should get into para-sports. I guess you had to look around to kind of see which one would suit you best.
Yeah, so as I said, I just kind of looked, the GP said para-sport, and I just looked it up and I was going through the different sports, and I was never really like a runner anyways. I would have done the running training, but I wouldn't have necessarily gone for a run. Like even in the off season, I would have cycled. Just I liked cycling, and I always kind of had bad knees when I was younger, so I cycled a lot, and I would have swam and stuff. So yeah, cycling was something I could do. I suppose when I was in the rehabilitation, I was at home, and I was basically not bedbound, but I used to be at home all the day, and I get out in the evening just with my mum or brothers or whatever on a bike, because it was the only thing that I could do that I get from A to B. So I just got on a bike one day, and I had a racing bike, like, and my dad just put flat pedals on it, and he just said, try it and see how you get on. Sure, it was pure wobbly the first day, but and my knee was like hitting off the bar. But then the more I did, the better I was, like, and yeah, I got in contact Cycling Ireland then, and they were like, straight away, a girl, yeah, that's brilliant, and a background in sport, even better. So went down to a TT then in Cork, and for the first one, I just watched what everyone was doing, and there was loads of different, we'll say, disabilities or impairments there. So it kind of opened my eyes to what parasport is all about, because I always thought parasport was just like maybe a spinal injury, visually impaired, or an amputee or something like that. Like that's where you'd see all the stories. So,
and it turned out you were pretty good.
Yeah, well, at the start now, I'd say I wasn't good at all. When I look back, like, I was so slow, like, but I think I had the determination to just keep trying, like, as I was sporty, and some doctors had said to me, you should look into something besides sport, but I had done sports science in college, and I just needed a sport. So I think for me, I didn't just want to cycle around at home, like, I wanted to compete. So when it was something I was able to do, I was just doing it as much as I could, like. So I think, yeah, with cycling, it takes a lot of years to progress and to get good. So, like, it's not just about, you won't become really good in a year, like. So I'm still just working on my base fitness and all that, like, trying to get as strong as I can.
Richael, can I ask, how did you end up losing the 70%? I think you said power in your right hand side. Am I right to say it's a form of epilepsy?
Yeah, well, what happened was I had a CyberKnife procedure for an underlying condition. I had an AVM in my brain, so that's just like an abnormal blood vessel, and I had this CyberKnife procedure, which was like a radiation, and it was non-invasive, so there was no surgery or anything, but unfortunately leading on from that, it led to swelling, which affected my motor on my right hand side, so it was my lower left, and that swelling I didn't realise was there at the time, so it just continued to get bigger and bigger until the point that one day I just woke up without the power that had hit that exact point that controlled the right side of my body. So I went into hospital and they just tried to get the swelling down. Like, that was the main objective, was to get that swelling down. But unfortunately with the brain, if the brain cells are killed, they won't regenerate themselves. So that's basically what happened to me. But yeah, from the swelling, I then was having seizures, and that was where I was diagnosed with epilepsy prior to this happening. And they thought that, they didn't realise it was related to CyberKnife at the time. But now looking back, it was just the swelling in my brain that I didn't know was there that was causing the seizures, and then in turn caused me to lose the power. So,
is it a freakish set of circumstances? It certainly sounds like it is.
Yeah, it was. I suppose it's not the way the treatment, you know, was supposed to work out or whatever. And it was just the exact point of the brain, I suppose, that controlled my motor side. So I was just unlucky in that that's what happened. Like, I suppose you could have lost memory or different parts of your brain or whatever, but it was just my right side that was affected and the motor. So yeah, like, it wasn't what was supposed to happen. I got that procedure because it was non-invasive, and because I remember saying to the consultant at the time, I'll get this in October because there's the least amount of sport, like, and he's like, yeah, you'll be back. Like, you didn't even need time off or anything. It was just a 1-day procedure, but then just the side effects and then swelling in the brain is just something so hard to control. It just kind of escalated from there.
And in terms of the seizures and obviously the practicalities of being on a bicycle, how often are those? Or I think I've read that you actually can feel them coming on at times.
Yeah, well, I haven't, since I've started cycling, I haven't got seizures. Like, that was while the swelling was still there in my brain. So once they got that under control, I stopped getting seizures. So I was actually getting seizures while I was playing football. I never got one playing football, but that was the stage where I was getting the seizures. So I just on medication now, and they don't really happen. So
the medication controls it?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Okay, right. So it's not like you're living with this kind of constant fear of this recurring. It's like they diagnosed it, found a medicine that works, and you can pretty much go about your day-to-day life.
Yeah, like, the epilepsy isn't affecting me at all, as in, I know, like, some people don't know why they have epilepsy or whatever. Mine was caused by the swelling. So once they got that under control, it kind of, the seizure stopped, you know. But obviously I need to stay on the medication just to make sure and that. But I haven't had one in about 3 years, so. So
you were an inter-county footballer with Roscommon. You go from that to going to a TT to kind of see what it's like. At what point do you realise that you're going to be super competitive in this and actually take it to an elite international level?
Yeah, I suppose it took me a good while, because I remember going to my first competition in Manchester on the track, and I had only just started, and they said, come and see what it's like or whatever. And I remember being there, and one of the lads said to me, you know, this could be the best thing that ever happened to you. And in my head, I always thought that someday I'd wake up and have that power back, like, that I was going to go back playing football. And I'd say it took me until even September last year, I think, was when I was at the World Championships. On the road over in Emmen, was the first time I realised, like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be competitive. Like, my goal is to get medals and, you know, to put everything into this. And I think that was when I realised as well, you know, you've had a brain injury for 3 years and you're not going to get better. But I think in the back of my head prior to that, I always thought I was going to be back playing football. Like, I always thought the more rehabilitation I do, the stronger I get. But yeah, I think now, like, everything revolves around the, like,
just having a bit of difficulty with Rochelle's line there. We might try and get that back. We're talking with Richael Timothy, who, as you heard, is a former Roscommon Gaelic footballer who is now an elite cyclist at World Championship level, has stood on the podium, and I kind of wanted to just chat with Richael about that, and if we can get her back, we will. So there's a picture of Richael in action in her Ireland singlet, and it's an absolutely remarkable story where you wake up one day with a brain injury and end up representing Ireland. So, Richael, you were just talking about the World Championships there and kind of coming to the realisation that this was what your future was going to be, and you end up on the podium.
Yeah, so this year I won bronze in the scratch race at the Track World Championships. Yeah, like, I suppose I went there to prove how much I'd improved from the previous year, and that was my goal. I was never looking at medals. I was never looking at, you know, I was looking at personal best times for myself. And then when it came to the scratch race, you know, I love group racing, and I said, you know, this is where I can prove myself as to how good I've got. And yeah, I came away with a bronze medal, so it was brilliant. And I think it gives me that bit of a push to show that I can push on now, especially for Tokyo next year. As a new athlete, I have another year to progress and another year to get stronger. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting more training in and hopefully getting fitter.
What's a scratch race? Sorry, what do you actually do in that?
Yeah, the scratch race, it's on the track, so it's a group race, so it's over 10 kilometres, so it's a bunch. So most other track events are like timed and you're on your own on the track or whatever, but this is a bunch, so it's just 10 kilometres and the first over the line wins.
So that's the velodrome. That must be pretty scary.
Yeah, like, I remember the first time I was on a velodrome, I suppose Cahill just said, don't stop pedaling, like, because the fixed gear bikes and you've no brakes or anything. and it was in Dublin in Sundrive, and that's a concrete track, and there's a slope, but it's nothing compared to. I remember going over then to Manchester, and he was like, "Don't look up," like, and it's such a slope. But I think with time, you have to be doing a certain speed to stay up on it. But with time, you just get more confident, and you don't have to be thinking about what you're doing, like. And especially for me with neurological as well, I just need the muscle memory. So the more I do something, the less I have to think about how you do it. So like, unlucky for us, there's no track in Ireland. So like, when we go over to Spain or wherever to train, I just need to take them a few days to get used to what it feels like to be on a track again. Whereas other able-bodied athletes or people with different conditions can just fly up onto it straight away and remember how to do it. So
but that's grand when there's nobody else on the track. But these races where there's other people with elbows and, you know, exactly the same determination as you have, I've always thought that there's a madness to those. That's why they're so great to watch, where there's 10 cyclists, particularly the international ones, where they're all in international colours and they're killing each other.
Yeah, no, it is. I kind of love that sort of like being under pressure and that sort of situation. So, but yeah, it is. You'd see a lot of crashes, but it's just because it's big skier. You just have to keep going and be so aware of what's going on around you, because just a little slip of the wheel or anything, and that's everyone down then.
Have you qualified for Tokyo? Are you guaranteed there yet, or is there a process?
There's no one's really guaranteed as of yet, but the way it works in the cycling is you qualify a slot. So the females qualify female slots and the males qualify male slots. So as of now, there are slots qualified for Ireland, but they're not designated to anyone yet. So there will be two more qualification races next year. So yeah, we have a good lot of points. So hopefully it'll just depend on other nations as well and how many points they build up, and then they divide it out. So it's a bit complicated, but yeah, we just have to wait next year, go to them 2 qualification races, and then hopefully we'll be there.
Very good. And your brother played football for Roscommon as well?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he played underage and then he played a year senior, I think. So yeah, we've always been really, really sporty family in general, just like playing football, soccer, every sport you could play. Like, so yeah, we played underage and then went up and played senior. And yeah, it's the sport, like, and the Gaelic is a big thing around here. Like, I live on the border of Roscommon and Galway, so I'd be going to matches supporting Galway because my parents would, but then they had to change and start supporting Roscommon when we were playing. So yeah,
controversial, right? That's great.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, are your parents big Friends fans? Because you're Rochelle and your brother's Ross. I was like, and they're just about the right age. You guys for the start of the hit TV series Friends.
Yeah, no, I think that was just accident, I'd say.
Well, listen, it's an incredible story. If anybody else out there thinks that they don't fully understand what the qualification process is to become a para-athlete, I guess you would be recommending strongly that they talk to somebody or they look up exactly what might qualify you. Yeah,
absolutely. Like, as I said, I wouldn't have known, and I would have seen it as, you know, visually impaired, spinal injury or whatever. But yeah, you definitely, if you have any sort of impairment, you should look into it, because there are little things that will qualify you. For example, there's so many different classes, even in the cycling, in other sports as well, that if your upper body is affected, you'll qualify for a specific class, or if your lower body. So like if you have club foot, or some people are just missing, we'll say they might have something with their hand or their fingers or whatever, and then they go into a different classification again. So it's definitely something to look into. But it's as well for someone who might have had an accident or was sick or an illness that caused them to lose something, that they could qualify. But as well, people with like cerebral palsy and that have had it from birth, they would qualify as well. So yeah, it's definitely something we're trying to, you know, get out there of the different type of impairments that would qualify you. And if you don't have an interest in sport, like some guys have got into it that have no background in sport at all. So it's not about being sporty before maybe something happened or being sporty from a young age. It's definitely something you can get into without having a sporting background as well.
And of course, it's not just at the elite level as well. It's about participation. It's about making sure that everybody gets an opportunity to kind of express their full physical capabilities in whatever way possible. So listen, it's an incredible story. Congratulations and best of luck, and we really hope that you end up being the one who gets to fill the designated slot for the qualified Irish women for Japan.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Rochelle, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks a million. Cheers.
Richael Timothy there, who is an Irish cyclist. And as I said, if you want to check out Cycling Ireland for more details on that, you can email them if you've got any questions. Contact us at cyclingireland.ie for more information. Now, there was a survey yesterday about how much money Irish people have raised over the period of lockdown, and there was incredible generosity. There were also a bunch of incredible feats that people had decided to undertake on behalf of various charities, and there's one of those that we just wanted to highlight at the moment, where this is in aid of Kappa Kids, which is the foundation for Kappa Hospital, and it's a run from Mallinhead in Donegal to Mizenhead in Cork. So Barry Sheehan is running for the Kappa Kids, and it's the National Orthopaedic Hospital. It's a charity very close to his heart because his son Michael was diagnosed with a condition called osteofibrous dysplasia. And without intervention, his shin would break easily and was likely to deform, could have broken through the skin as well. So surgery was the only option of fixing the bone. And after the last 4 years, he's had countless surgeries and related treatments. We're hoping to chat to Barry on tomorrow's OTB AM. We're hearing he's currently around the Midlands on his run across the country. So please do support and donate if you can. You can check that out. It's a GoFundMe if you search Malin to Mizen for Kappa, and you'll get the details of that, and we might tweet that out as well. So I think he's raised about 50 grand, but it's a fairly phenomenal achievement to be able to run that. I think it's 600 kilometres in 6 days. So a lot of people undertaking feats that they never thought would be possible. Some of them spurred on by the fact that the pandemic arrived, and people have been incredibly generous. So if you can support that cause, it is for a very good cause indeed. 25 minutes past 9 this morning. Keith Wood's State of the Union with Éanna Falvey is up next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Football is back.
For Sterling! Raheem Sterling!
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Missing this?
This is the dream. Shahi on Fringlode. Whether you're from Cushendall in Antrim or Mount Sion in Watford, this is what it's all about.
And get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB's State of the Union with Keith Wood.
Okay, so you're very welcome along to this week's edition of Keith Wood's State of the Union. We've got a two-parter for you this week, and we're talking about the relative health of the game. That's the whole point of the State of the Union. We're specifically talking about health issues arising out of the game of rugby this week. Our first guest for part one is Dr. Éanna Falvey. Keith, I might, as usual, let you set the scene here about why you wanted to focus specifically on health. I think it's probably fairly obvious to everybody following the game, but it is a key issue facing the game.
It is, and we've looked at a whole variety of different elements, sure, in terms of the health of the game and sustainability and the issues that happen with governance and commerciality and elements of this. But this is the real health of the game. So we have the great benefit of having World Rugby's Chief Medical Officer sitting with us, Éanna Falvey, which just gives us a chance and an opportunity to look at what the game was like beforehand, what are the changes that are happening to the game to make it safer, and also how we're actually dealing with COVID in the rugby world. And I think that's the first question I have to ask you. You're the main man. You're in charge of this from a rugby perspective. No pressure there, Éanna. How are you getting on with it?
It's been a challenging situation. Look, rugby is exactly the same as the rest of society. We had everything absolutely turned on its head in March. We had a player welfare symposium in Paris in March, and we made lots of plans and had things ready to go and look at, and it literally got thrown out the window a couple of weeks later. While we were in Paris at the time, there was the first real kind of concern around whether or not Italy was going to be a real issue, and it really took off from there. I think like all of society, it's shocked rugby to the core, really, to be honest. A lot of people out of work, a lot of people, their livelihoods are at risk, in terms of the community game, people worrying about getting back to play, getting back into activity, missing out on meeting their friends, missing out on their regular exercise that rugby forms an important part of. And I think, very early on, we recognised that coronavirus is a global phenomenon. It's not about Ireland, it's not about the United Kingdom, it's not about any particular place. And 2 weeks in, I organised a group call for all the CMOs around the world. We've got 120 member unions, and we had 88 on the call. And what we actually looked to do was to get data from all the unions on what was happening in their country. So what stage of lockdown they were at, what measures were in place. And we built, with Professor Ross Tucker in South Africa, we built a profile of what's actually happening in each country. And we've been following that every 2 weeks since then to try and see if we could, forecast what might happen in terms of a return to activity, to see could we help people. And on the back of that, we generated a return to play document in April, which we've just updated this week, which has been adopted by a number of sports. But it's an effort to help unions, help clubs and competitions get back into activity and do what people want to do, but most importantly, to do that safely. Because the mantra all along is the more safe we are in getting back, the quicker we'll get back. If we rush, it's not going to be a good thing.
Éanna, do you see a big difference between how the domestic game will be able to respond and how the professional game will?
Yeah, it's I would have said early on that the professional game had a distinct advantage because you have a lot more resources available. You have staff, you have players that are used to being monitored, to being as someone said, I need a day sheet in my life. Being told what to wear, where to be, what meeting to be at, and that type of infrastructure has been critical to getting people back safely, to getting public health on side, making public health understand that they're looking at trying to get people back into offices around the world, but they're quickly realising that professional sport is the easiest group to get back because they're so regimented. You literally know where everybody is at any point in time. I was on a call last night with the AFL in Australia, and they had the case of an Irish player with a positive test, and they were able to, his club were able to show literally where every player was while they were on the premises, and public health were seriously impressed and were able to basically bring the contacts he had down to the partner he had in training for wrestling, which meant that we were able to really, really narrow down the contacts for one particular guy. So I would have said at the very start that professional sport, elite sport, had a distinct advantage, but what's actually become more obvious is that the solution is much simpler. It's about disease prevalence in the country. That's what it's about. So there is no community disease prevalence in New Zealand, so they're back playing full rugby with no restriction at all. There's extremely low disease prevalence in Australia, recent outbreak now in Victoria, but they're going to get back into rugby by virtue of that. In countries like the Netherlands, where there's a reasonably high prevalence, not far off from us, they've made a decision early on to get kids back into play, and they've done so very, very safely. So the difference between rugby coming back in Ireland and rugby coming back in the United Kingdom, they're two different things right now because the rates are so different in both countries. And we've done a lot of work on the risk you have in a group of 50 people for encountering a random person who's infected with COVID. And that's much, much lower, say, in Ireland or in Italy or France than it is in the UK or the United States at the moment. So realistically, it's less about the level you're playing at and more about what's happening in the country you're living in, really.
Look, you mentioned contact, and I know that contact gets confused when we talk about contact sport. And I know this isn't necessarily the forum for it, but I want to ask the question anyway, is the relation for, like, can you define what contact means? So if you were to get sick and with COVID and you then had to say, who have you been in contact with? Can you just define what contact means in a societal and a rugby context? And is there any difference between them?
Yeah, Good man. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the contact in a COVID sense first. So it's not just COVID, it's for any infectious disease. A contact, WHO guidelines would be that if, for example, you've been caring for somebody who's a known infected person with COVID, that would be number one. If you spend 15 minutes in close proximity, which is within 1 meter of somebody in an enclosed environment, that's another close contact. If you're sitting on public transport close to somebody who's a known contact for any period of time, so as in the same seat as somebody in public, that's another contact. There's nuance in all of this though, and they're set guidelines which are for any infectious disease, but there are 302 published clusters of infection from China, and 301 of those are indoors. Okay, there is only one cluster out of over 300 which is outdoors. So barely anybody gets infected outside. It's when you have aerosolized droplets in the air, in undisturbed air. So when you have air that's moving, it moves away very quickly, and your risk is much, much lower. But if you're sitting on the bus next to somebody and there's no air moving, and that person is breathing away and they're not wearing a mask, you're going to be breathing their air. And if they've got it, you have a chance of getting it. So that's what constitutes a contact. So what we did very early on in the piece was we looked at the risk in COVID. It's not sweat, it's not touching somebody, it's not any other route, it is breathing their air. So very early on in the piece, I heard a fantastic description was, if you're talking to somebody and you can smell their breath, you're breathing their air. That's pretty much where you are in terms of the proximity. But so, tackling somebody around the ankles or around the hips, you're not really going to be breathing their air in an outdoor scenario. But if you are upright and you're face to face with somebody, say for example in a choke tackle, and you're there for 3 or 4 seconds, you are breathing their air, and that's probably an exposure right there. Similarly, if you tackle somebody on the ground and you're fighting for a ball and your heads are in close proximity, that's a contact as well. And what we looked at was, we got the game analysis guy, Rhys Jones and Ben Hester did some phenomenal work on us. We looked at 60 games, and we looked at all the phases of play where there was close contact. So the scrum, we looked at the line out in the maul, and we looked at rucks, and we looked at upright tackles basically, and we coded those through the game. And we looked at what player and positions were most involved. And basically the props and the second rows did the most, followed closely by the hookers and back rows. And they were all up over 10 minutes of cumulative time in that type of situation. And we were comparing that to the 15 minutes described by the WHO, and that was where we came up with the idea of looking at changing around the reset of the scrum and being as good as we could around the high tackle sanction framework to bring the tackle height down to prevent those. So they were ideas where we were trying to limit that contact. And unfortunately, what happens in a lot of these things is people read a headline and they don't read the rest of the information, and they come out with people are trying to ban scrums and all this kind of, not at all. So what we were looking at was, in an average game, there are 9.5 scrums. And in those 9.5 scrums, take a cumulative 18 seconds from when the players come together to 4 seconds after the ball leaves, which gives the forwards 4 seconds to pick themselves up and get out of each other's space. If you have a reset scrum, you have a set, you have an engagement, you have a collapse or a break. The players come back up, face each other, are reset again, and it's 61 seconds on average for those. And there are 3.5 to 4 of those in a game. So the time spent in that reset scrum phase was more than all of the scrums put together. Now, allied to this, we've gotten some more information. There's a modelling company in Belgium called ANSYS who did some work for the BBC, and we were in contact with them last week. And they did some really incredible modelling where they modelled for their airway droplets, and they show that when the players come together in the scrum and come down, they're breathing downwards. And if the air that's falling that has a high droplet load, or the heavier droplets, it's going onto the grass and blowing away out from underneath. So the actual phase of the scrum is probably of lower risk than when you're up facing each other about to engage. When you would have been eyeballing that other guy and letting him know you were going to get one over on him, that was the dangerous part, rather than the part when you were actually when you were engaged and pushing against each other. So there's a lot we don't know about this, but what we tried to do in that phase was to see, is there anything we could do to cut down that close contact, that what we called high transmission risk contact. So, differentiating out from the contact where you tackle somebody around the ankle or around the thigh or similar. And the RFU went off and did some work with Rugby League, and I was chatting with them about it last night, and they had a look at GPS, and they saw that once players come together, the GPS was no way accurate enough to actually give anything around the proximity. And really, they've gone in a massive circle and arrived back to where we were, which is it's about face-to-face stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be any change in that, but that was what we looked at,
Well, I think if we were talking through the general cut and thrust of what rugby is and what rugby has become, especially at scrum time, you would say that there's too much time meant messing around trying to figure out who's going where, what and when. We had a look back, and I've been talking to the referees, a group of referees over the last 2 weeks, and it's been interesting, their perspective on it as well. But back 20 years, so pretty much when I finished, the scrums were set incredibly quickly. We had a huge collision, which we've thankfully got rid of, right? And there were resets and all that sort of stuff, but you're talking 30 seconds. I mean, the amount of time getting ready for a scrum was just instantaneous. Where are you? I get my arm here. I get my arm here. I'm ready. Let's go. We need to get back to that. Actually, if we get back to that, we get rid of all those elements. And so those are initial guidelines that came out from you and your working committee in relation to it. For me, that idea of moving away, not from scrummaging, but from the scrum that happened afterwards, I get that, because it's a bit of a blight on the game. I mean, I slagged the referees saying, actually, what I want are 80 minutes of scrummaging. But you really don't. But you want to have that competition, and you need to have that competition. But it is, some of that detail has kind of moved an awful lot. I don't want to spend all my time, and unless you have a question, Ger, on COVID, you've been listening?
No. It was really interesting to see the level of detail that you guys are going into, and also the opportunities to maybe use this moment for everybody to go, well, this is actually a danger in our game, and for COVID we're taking it out, but actually it's going to be beneficial in the long run for choke tackles to disappear from the sport, for example. But that was interesting.
Yeah, and look, I think everybody's got the right. Everybody wants to do the right thing by the game, but people feel differently about how that should happen, and that's I think that's part of the evolution. There'll be moves made that are correct and moves made that are incorrect, but I think we need to be agile. We live in a society where things change quickly, and I think we need to be able to adapt to the pressures and the pressure points on the game, and I think this is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I do. And also there's that law of unintended consequences. You make one change and then suddenly you get a preponderance of knee injuries, whereas before it was shoulder injuries, and that happens all the time. I don't want to get totally bogged down in COVID, because we're getting that 24/7 elsewhere. But what I'd like is a little quick snapshot into your job, into the roles and responsibilities of CMO of World Rugby.
Yeah, certainly it's not as a part-time immunologist / virologist, which I've had to be for the last 3 months. Not what I signed up for. It wouldn't have been an area of particular prowess in college, I'll tell you that much, but we weren't long brushing up with it. No, but I think I took over in January from Martin Raftery, and I was very lucky to have, from March of last year, I was able to sit in as his deputy for 9 months to really try and get a feel of things. And then he stepped back into the deputy role now, so I have him to fall back on for some advice and as a really sound a sounding board for where we're going this. But I mean, first and foremost for this game, this rugby is something that people are supposed to enjoy. It's supposed to make their lives better, and it is supposed to help them to grow, when they play this game from being young to old, is grow into a better person for being involved in the game. That's the objective of this. And, a lot of the time the focus on rugby tends to be on injury and what does that mean? And that's because it's a very measurable outcome. You can say I played rugby and I hurt my knee and this is what happened. But we've actually, one of the first things that we've looked at was what are the positive aspects of being involved in rugby. So we're engaging with Andrew Murray from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and Steph Brennan, who's doing some work with the British Journal of Sports Medicine, on looking at the health benefits of rugby. And they've done a scoping article on this first, but they're now going to progress on and do some more. So I think, number one, all the time, in this job, the first thing you'd say is my job is to make sure that the rugby injuries are lessened, and that we do better with that. But number one, I think, really is to say that team sport has huge positives for people, and our job is to promote that. One of the huge issues in society right now is mental health. Mental health issues are they're right the way through every strand of society, and I'm really interested to see some of the commentary around mental health in sport. It's not mental health in sport, it's mental health in society. It is a societal issue, and I think sport has a huge role to play to benefit people with mental health. So your teammates, that sense of community, working with people for a common goal, these are all things that, being involved in a team, are hugely beneficial to somebody who may be struggling with depression, with anxiety, these kind of things. So I'd say, number one, that positive role that rugby can have as a team sport, which is famous for not just being a team sport, but for being a sport which is a community, which is a brotherhood, which is a sisterhood, and really promoting that area. So I would say, number one, that's where we are right now. Number two, our big journey at the moment has been the concussion journey. As the CMO of World Rugby, I couldn't speak about my job without talking about what we're doing around concussion. From 2011 onwards, when rugby introduced the off-field assessment, at the time I was a doctor with the Irish rugby team. I'd been involved in some pretty high-profile scenarios prior to having an off-field assessment, where I had allowed players back onto the pitch. Some very high-profile players, one in particular, and it was a really, really tough time to be a team doctor. It was personally, professionally, really devastating situation to be in, where you've got, somebody who gives their all to the sport, and you feel that you may have let them down in some way, and not because of anything that you do that's wrong, but because the system isn't there to look after what you're doing properly. Now we have a system in place. It's not perfect, but it's probably one of the better systems in team sport around the world, and World Rugby is a leader in this area, and our job is to progress this further. So I'm involved with every 4 years there's a consensus meeting on concussion in sport, and so I'm involved in one of the systematic reviews. I'm leading one of those. It was supposed to be on in Paris this year, but it'll be next year now instead. And we have a relationship with Stellenbosch University, who are going to manage our concussion database in future, and we're basically publishing on a regular basis around this. So I mean, that's an area where we're doing lots of good stuff, but we need to continue to do more, and we need to do it better. So that would be the second part of the job. The third part, I think, is looking at whether or not in rugby we can bring people who need more help into this. So whether or not it's developing nations, whether or not it's women in sport, women in rugby, and engaging more with these areas is something that I think we can do better, and certainly I hope to do better with. And that's been a central part of what we want to do in the next year or two.
I just kind of pick up on a couple of points there. One was on the idea of risk, and for me, risk is, well, it's an insurance word, but it also is a great one in terms of education. If you know and understand the potential issues that can happen when you play sport, I think there's a line somewhere that exercise is good for you and sport's bad for you. It's definitely said by somebody who hadn't played a team sport, because sport, you get broken up a bit. I've had more than my fair share of injuries. I wouldn't change a thing. Well, I might change certain parts of the rules, and I might have changed when I came back a little. But I think I went into it educated to the idea that this is a game that has huge pluses, huge aspirational and success stories, and also has a negative side where you can get bad bangs, bad injuries. You can suffer from depression. You can, which you say is a societal thing, but also there's a sense of team and camaraderie of where that alleviates a huge amount of mental health, knowing that you have somebody to talk to always, and you have people who've shared experiences with you. But for me, the point on risk is, and especially in terms of concussion, have we done enough? Have we done enough in terms of the education? I think we're a bit slow out of the blocks, if I'm honest with it, to try and push that education piece all along. And are we quick enough then to bring, to make the changes to the laws that are required, maybe to bring the height down or to alleviate some of the other areas of risk within the game? And like, are we giving enough out there to say, this is the game, there are risks, but these are manageable risks, but there is a risk nonetheless attached to it? Are we that frank and open about it?
I think, well, first of all, I think with regard to the education piece, it's a central component. We have basically the online components we have for education around rugby need to be done by anyone who's involved in the sport at the moment. You're not allowed to go onto the pitch in rugby unless you've done a level 2 immediate care course, and unless you have done all of the concussion modules, which are regularly updated. We just updated them earlier on in the year, this year. So I would say that there's a lot of education out there. I'm not quite sure I'd agree with you that we've been late to the party on that. I'd have to take you up on that in terms of, I'm not sure what you're comparing that to in terms of being late and who we're late in comparison to, but we can always do better. Absolutely, we can always do better. And I think that's an area that we would continue to try and work with. I had a very interesting meeting in the Player Welfare Symposium in March, where we had a session on the high tackle sanction framework, and we actually had quite a bit of pushback from the player group on this, from the players around what it meant and what it was doing to the game, etc. And we had a number of high-level coaches there, some of whom were supportive of it, some who weren't at all, and it was a 45-minute session that turned into an hour and a half, and I was standing in the podium for an hour and a half, and it was certainly a challenging time, but it was absolutely brilliant, because there's nothing like that kind of feedback in terms of what you can learn from the situation. But Ian Foster came up to me afterwards, and he hadn't been crowned in his role quite at that point, but he came up and said, he said, "You learned something this morning, didn't you?" And I said, "Well, I learned a lot." But he said, "Yeah, but you learned something in particular." And I said, "No." He goes, "It's all about perception." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "as far as you're concerned, you have given them this information a couple of times and they understand it. But as far as they're concerned, they don't understand it. And that's all that matters. Their perception is all that matters in this situation. So you have to understand that no matter how you think you're doing, while somebody has a doubt about this, there's a doubt about it, and that's where you are." And I think, for me, that's something that has struck home, and just means we've got to, communication-wise, we have to do better than we're doing. And that's not just aspirationally, we're going to do better. It's something that where that message has to be gotten across better than it is. It's all out there. There's lots of information around this, but certainly it's something that we need to push on a regular basis.
In relation to slow to the party, not that I'm being defensive, but I don't know that it needs to be compared to anybody else. It needs to be the sport making certain it looks after itself. And when there was a prevalence about 8, 9, 10 years ago of concussions. So there was always concussions, by the way, and there were protocols that were followed all the way along. I always felt if you were very lucky, you had a cracking doctor. And in Ireland, we had Dr. Mick Malloy. And I didn't care what Mick ever said, but if he said anything, that was it. That was the story done. You just followed what he said. It was a great sense of trust that goes within it. But when the tackles were happening, the high tackles, the collisions in the air, they did change, but it took a couple of years to be able to do it. And I know that World Rugby has the capacity to be able to change a law or, for safety reasons on the spur of the moment. And it took a long time to figure out what was the best route to do in terms of the return to play protocols or the assessments that were happening on the field. So I do accept the fact that rugby got there, but I do think it took a period of time to try and do it. And I'm not worried about other sports in terms of, because I have to be in love with this one. So, the idea is that we would try and do it better and better than most. And I also just at one point on, the players love what they're doing and they don't want to change a huge amount because they've worked very hard to do it in that fashion. Sometimes you do want the players' input to it, but you also have to protect them from themselves in as much as possible. And that's very true. So, I can understand when you've built up a technique to be able to tackle high across the chest and you managed to put 3 or 4 stats in every match and you don't want that to change. But it did come out that there was a lot of head collisions that were happening, were causing concussions or prospective concussions. So that was something that, again, I felt could have been changed a little bit earlier. We're looking at it from the side saying, how is that not a penalty? How can we get that sanction? And it's one of maybe the unintended consequences that comes out of COVID, about that proximity of face-to-face, but the idea of trying to get those tackles and those hits down.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think I'll unpick a couple of those. So I suppose, first of all, in terms of, this is all based on that, what I call that concussion in sport group, CISG, which every 4 years gives the state of the union on what's happening with concussion. And it's basically, it's all of the evidence gathered together and the recommendations on this. So in terms of rugby coming to an off-field assessment to look at concussion. This is something that at the time I was a team doctor with Ireland. We were crying out for this, and there was a huge debate in rugby with some people who were very anti an off-field assessment, somebody who were very pro, and we got there. And basically that process is in evolution. It changes all the time. We changed 2 things in the off-field assessment last year. We'll change a couple more this year, based on evidence and making it better. So I think the process is evolving all the time, but we have to do it based on evidence rather than emotion. We have to look at our information, study our data, and then based on the outcomes, change that. So I think that has to be, and I hate the phrase, but that has to be an iterative process. It has to be something that goes with the information over a period of time. I think the aspect around the high tackle being an obvious one at the moment. We've done some analysis on this. Fact now, it's 2 years old at this point now, where we showed that if the 2 players are upright and their heads are in the same space, that the chance of a head injury are 6 times higher than if one player is bent at the waist. And that's, it's good data, but we have very high profile coaches, very high profile players who feel that if they don't have the option to tackle high, that they're forced to tackle low, they feel that they're at a distinct disadvantage and are at risk of being concussed by tackling low. Because if you watch a game, more people get a concussion around by being hit by a knee or a thigh than they do upright. It's just that happens an awful lot more times than the upright tackle does. So if you have 10 tackles around the thigh, you'll get 2 concussions. If you have 10 tackles up high, you'll get 6. So the situation there is, it is when you watch it and you go, there are far more tackles when you tackle low, therefore we can't force everybody low. That's a flawed logic, unfortunately. But it's one of those things where to do this properly, you can either ram in laws which are forced upon people and they're extremely unwelcoming of, or you can try and do it by some form of pseudo consensus where you get people involved, you get people to understand what you're doing, you show them the information, you show them a second time, you show them a third time. By the time you're showing the third time, they're telling you that your information is out of date. So we're right now going back over our information again to show that the same stuff is there. So this is a battle. It's a battle from our perspective to try and make the game safer. But for many people, it's a battle because they feel it's the fabric of the game that's being affected. And it's a player's choice to make a decision on the pitch, which is difficult for them.
Is the game getting safer? Do you feel it is getting safer and it has got significantly safer? And if the answer is yes and the trend is going in the right direction, what's the next kind of the next frontier when it comes to reducing those numbers that you're at the moment even further?
Yeah, so like in terms of rates going across the game, we can talk about overall injury rates and we can talk about concussion rates. So the concussion rates have been relatively stable for the last 2.5, 3 seasons now, and as Keith will know, when I started with Munster back in 2003, literally unless a player was unconscious, they weren't concussed. And it's gone to a point now where if a player has a bang and gets up and stumbles 2 steps, we take them off the pitch and have a look at them. So we have swung from way out here to way across here. And, even with that really heightened suspicion, the rates are now stable. So I think we're pretty much at the pitch of it now here. So we need to see this starting to come down. We saw a dip downwards, which probably isn't statistically significant yet. And now COVID has stopped everything. So we don't know where we are. So the frontier here is that upright situation. That's the number one ground. We just had a call this morning with the LNR in France, who for the last season have been doing a trial on what we're calling the tackle technique warning. It's something we ran at the last 220 World Championships, where when a player runs into an upright tackle and doesn't bend at the waist and makes contact with another player's head, they get a warning, and if they get 2 warnings, they may miss the next game. So they've been running this in France without the sanction for the last year, and we're now looking at the outcome of that. It was supposed to run for this season as well, but obviously it's been cut short now. So we're looking at analysis of that. So for me, that's the battleground at the moment. That's where we're looking at in terms of an approach. This is the next big step, because I think if you talk to any coach, when the guy, shoots out of the line and smashes into the other player and basically makes this upright contact, it's generally a technique issue. They haven't paused, they haven't, used their feet to steady themselves up before they actually strike. And you've got basically players who are being drilled to get up on the line as quickly as they can and aren't necessarily skilled enough to do that. I mean, I remember speaking to a coach at the symposium the year before, and he described how they brought a new defense technique into their club, and in the first 2 games they had 3 concussions, and he worked out that the players weren't actually able to get low enough to safely make the tackles. So they went back and they got players running under kind of nipple high hurdles to come down into the tackle before they did. And they did with the S&C guys to get hip mobility, to get them lower, to be able to get lower, to get into the position to do it safely, and then had a great season in terms of their defence system.
And I'm laughing on how things change and don't change. Back in the day, which is 30 years ago now nearly, Willie Anderson would stand with a piece of bamboo and you had to ruck underneath the bamboo, and if you didn't, he'd whip you on the back. I don't think he'd get away with that now. Didn't seem to do us any harm whatsoever. There are a huge amount of things to go back to what happened in the past.
Yeah.
Just on that upright tackle, and sorry, this is a point of law, but I definitely have been talking to too many referees. If a guy runs up out of the line and clashes head to head with a ball carrier, that's a high tackle, is it not?
Head to head, yeah, it is.
And so that's where the sanction should go. So even though the tackler could be concussed or knocked out, that is a yellow card or a red card offence, depending on the manner in which it's done, because it's a little bit reckless. Mm-hmm. And again, that's something that we see and they say, oh my God, he got hit in the head. We'll take him off, but it actually should be a sanction because we need to get rid of it out of the game.
That's correct. And my feeling on this is that, and this is an emotive point, but unless you have a stick, people don't listen. Unless you have a penalty for poor behavior, people aren't going to change that behavior. Coaches aren't going to coach it better. Players aren't going to be aware that they need to change it. So you have to have that stick there. And what's been very interesting is in the Super Rugby in New Zealand. They're trialling at the moment an orange card, which is essentially that if someone gets sent off in just that situation for either reckless or deliberate head contact, after 20 minutes, another player comes on instead of them. The idea being that the player is punished, the team is punished, but that the game isn't irrevocably changed. And there's pros and cons about that. It depowers the stick I spoke about. But second of all, there's something to be said for the game, for the other 29 guys on the pitch, for one guy's reckless action. So I don't know that area has been fully decided yet, but it's interesting. It's another way to look at this at the moment.
Well, I think, as you mentioned on something else, it's all in the nuance, and if you tidy up that to be, if somebody is deliberately fighting or brawling, that's a red card, and 100%. So it depends on how you can kind of maneuver that to be something that maybe protects the integrity of the game. And I'm saying that not just that you don't send a guy off, but actually that match in itself, that integrity is protected.
But and my argument there is involve the coaches, because the coaches are the best people in the world for working around the rules. You give them a set of rules and they'll find a way around it. That's their job. So get them to help you to come up with that. So that's the idea of having that truly multidisciplinary group, not having just doctors or administrative people, and certainly, and that's something which we did with the high tackle sanctuary framework, was we got defence coaches in to look at all of this in advance, because doctors aren't in a position to make these kind of calls. The people that make the calls are the coaches and the players.
Do you get disappointed then? At the last World Cup, there were coaches saying that they disagreed with it, that this was the manner in which their country played, and they tried to hit across the chest. Do you get upset when you hear things like that?
Listen, everybody's entitled to an opinion. Not at all. I mean, I would say you have to have that kind of conversation, because if we're all Stepford wives and we're all singing off the same hymn sheet, you're never going to progress on this. When I worked with a team, when I work in my work as a sports and exercise position, you have to have an element of friction in any team for it to work properly. You know as well as I do, the best teams you played in, there were a couple of guys in the team you just couldn't stand them, but you could get the results because of that friction. They drove you on, you drove them on.
You don't have to like them. You just you have to respect them and trust them on the field.
And you don't even have to agree with them. You just have to be able to see their perspective, and you have to be able to take that on board. But, unfortunately, what happens a lot is, because people are of extremely strong characters, people get into a mode where they transmit, but they cannot receive, and we need to be, you need to have two stations there, you know what I mean? So I would say that I think you have to have that kind of rigorous debate, because if you don't, you're actually not going anywhere.
Yeah, look, Éanna, this has been great, and you've been great with your time. We've got James Robson standing by to do part 2 of this. So one last question for you, to bring it right back to the very start. With rugby ramping up over the next couple of weeks, would you feel safe going out onto the pitch for the next couple of weeks? Is that the message that you want to get out there?
Yes, I think we had a great chat with Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter in Cambridge last week. He's an epidemiologist who's been looking at this area, and he'd written some very good articles, and we contacted him directly to speak to him. And essentially, he's done some really good modelling on if you are 20 to 30 years of age in the United Kingdom, now, which is at far higher risk than somewhere like Ireland or Italy or in fact France at the moment. Your risk of dying from COVID is lower than your risk of dying from the common flu. Okay? If you're under 40, your risk of dying in a road traffic accident is higher than your risk of dying from COVID. The risks from this disease in a healthy population without comorbidities is quite low. That risk is for 20 to 30-year-olds, including people who are 20 to 30 and have underlying health issues, which sport will naturally weed out in those scenarios. So the risk is lower again. So that's information based on 17 million records from the NHS, from GP records in the NHS. So it's quality, it's high quality information. So as the time comes on, we understand that the individual risk is very low. the risk isn't actually really as much to the players as it is to their families. So if you get an infection and you go home and you meet your granny, or there's somebody at home who's unwell, bringing that back to them is what we'd be concerned about. But to be perfectly honest with you, depending on what the prevalence is in society, you've got to ask yourself the question, are you more at risk outside playing rugby with 25 or 26 other guys or 40 other guys or girls, or sitting in a cafe with 25 people with no air movement at all? And the reality of the situation, you're at a far higher risk sitting in a cafe having a coffee afterwards. That's data. We know that right now. So in your rugby environment, it's the dressing room where you're all shouting and having a crack afterwards in a room that's closed. That's far more dangerous than being out on the pitch. So getting people back, keep the dressing rooms closed, get people to drive to the training session, drive home afterwards for their shower afterwards, and really hammer home to them that their choices in society are far more important at the moment than what they do when they're in the team, because that's the most controlled part of their day.
All right, excellent stuff. Dr. Éanna Falvey, the CMO of World Rugby, thanks a million for being our guest this week on Keith Wood's State of the Union. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with James Robson next.
OTB's State of the Union with Keith Wood.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.